Okay, we're on the record.
Council agenda, Township of Parsippany Troy Hills, regular Township Council meeting of December 18th, 2018.
Posting of notice and adequate notice of this meeting has been provided in accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meetings Law by filing the notice in the office of the Township Clerk and by posting the meeting notice on the bulletin board at the municipal building and on the municipal website on December 20th, 2017, where it has remained posted since that date. A legal notice appeared in the Daily Record and the Newark Star Ledger on December 27th, 2017, and was forwarded by fax to other local newspapers on December 20th, 2017. Council meetings are videotaped and aired on Public Access Channel 21 at 7 p.m. Sundays and Wednesdays, and are also available for viewing at www.parsippany.net.
Please rise for the flag salute. Mr. DePiero, if you would.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mr. DePiero,
Here.
Ms. Grignani,
Present.
Ms. McCarthy,
Here.
Ms. Peterson,
Here.
Mr. Carriffy.
Here.
Also in attendance are Business Administrator Keith Kasmark, Township Attorney Jim Lott, and Township Clerk Colette Madden. Council President, we have a quorum. You may begin.
Thank you. Upcoming meetings, January 8th, 2019 at 6:30 p.m., reorganization meeting, agenda meeting. Be following that. And January 22nd, 2019 at 7 o'clock will be our regular meeting. Approval of minutes, agenda meeting November 8th, 2018, regular meeting November 20th, 2018, and the agenda meeting December 4th, 2018. Entertain a motion.
Motion.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Ms. Grignani,
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy,
Yes.
Ms. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, presentation reports. Colette, did you want to do that now?
Yes. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to take just a few minutes. We will be swearing in our new Deputy Clerk, Leslie Miller. So, before we start, I just want to say just a couple words about Leslie. I came on in 2015, late 2015, and it was a big transition, to say the least, coming onto this town. I'm a new guy, and everybody's questioning, who is this guy? And, you know, it was a new job to learn. And the transition was not the best, but it was, you know, we made it work. And Leslie, who was in another department at that time, really made all the effort to come on and help and do everything she can to assist me in making that transition, because she had experience in the clerk's office. And so she made my transition here very as easy as it could be. So I do thank you for that. And throughout that time, you know, I was then able to bring her into my office because I realized how invaluable she is to the clerk's office and to the success of this township. So we got her on, and she's been through the entire process. She's taken the courses, she's passed the certifications, but more importantly, she cares more than anybody I know, and she has clearly the hardest work ethic in that office. And I can tell you that the success of my office is instrumental to her being there. There's no question about that. So without her, I could not do what I've done, and I really do think this is really well-deserved, Leslie. So with this, without further ado, I'd like to call Leslie Miller up, and whoever will be swearing you in is Mr. Clark. Come on up.
Left hand on the Bible. All right. Are you ready for your oath of allegiance? I, Leslie Miller,
I, Leslie Miller,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of New Jersey,
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and to the governments established in the United States. I'm swearing myself in. I just want, I may be old, but I can still read. All right, so, all right, and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the same and to the governments established in the United States,
to the same and to the governments established in the United States
and in this state,
And in
under
this
the
state.
authority of people,
and under the authority of people,
so help me God.
so help me God.
I do further solemnly swear
I
or
do-
affirm
I do further solemnly swear or affirm
that I will impartially and justly perform all the duties of the office of Deputy Clerk.
that I will impartially and
Ju-
justly perform all duties of the office of Deputy Clerk,
according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
Okay. Congratulations.
Well, maybe I should.
It's up to you, whatever you like.
It is, I just like to say that it's my honor.
Yeah.
This is my husband.
He's not like that at home, is he?
I just want to say it is an honor, a true honor to work with Khaled, and I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for him. He has given me so many opportunities, and he has believed in me, and when nobody else would. And it is really from the heart that I love working with him, for him, and I enjoy being on his team and partners with him.
Ditto. Truly ditto.
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations.
Definitely well deserved. Thank you.
Congratulations, Leslie.
It's always been a pleasure. My whole time here, it's always been a pleasure.
Same for my short time here.
Mike, you're a long time, right? Okay.
Me too.
All right.
Well, we might as well chime in.
Yes,
Us
of
too.
course.
Okay, at this time, we're going to have a presentation by Stanberry.
Yeah, I think they're gonna do it. Yeah, I just went to the mayor's conference room for a minute, I think, to make some last minute.
Oh, you want to skip forward while they get it?
Oh.
Merry Christmas.
Okay, yeah, we're going to move forward while they're getting ready. Mr. Lott, anything?
I have nothing, Mr. President.
Okay. Business Administrator, Mr. Casmark?
Thank you, Council President. This week, my office finished one-on-one meetings with the various departments. We met with 18 of our department heads, just setting the path forward on operational issues and personnel issues for 2019. We're commencing, or continuing, I should say, meetings with the blue collar for the blue collar negotiations of their union contract. We held a meeting today, and I'll be reporting out at an executive session to the council on those processes in January. Tomorrow, December 19th, between 6 and 9, at the Knoll West, there will be a membership meeting. We invite everyone who is a member or user of the Knoll Golf Club to join with the leadership team up there, both on the Parsippany side and on the Kemper side. And I want to thank Danielle DeLuca from Kemper for organizing that meeting. We look forward to a productive discussion. We've also commenced our master plan meeting. I know there was one meeting with the community last week. We've started to meet with various department heads and Susan Favada, who's the planner, who's working on the master plan. So we will continue with those in the early months of 2019. And I also want to congratulate Leslie Miller on her appointment tonight as Deputy Municipal Clerk. Leslie's been a pleasure to work with the last 3 months, and I look forward to working with her in her new capacity.
Thank you. Stanberry, ready?
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Mark Potchmet with Stanberry Development. I am a co-founder. My partner and co-founder John Meyer is also here this evening. We are from Columbus, Ohio. We are here on a regular basis. We are Stanberry Development. There's not some big committee back in Columbus. It's the two of us. We also have tonight our leasing partner, Mark Hayes, is here. Not sure where he is, right there. He is our leasing partner, so if there's any special requests for restaurants or retail spaces, you can talk to Mark. Our JV partners are here this evening, Claremont Companies from Far Hills, New Jersey. Jeff Bastow and Max Dorn. Claremont has been brought in for their multifamily and construction expertise for the project. Also here tonight is our growing legal team, Steve Perlman, Adam Peterson. Is Bob Garofalo here? Not that.
Joe O'Neill.
Bob's on his way. And Joe O'Neill. So my partner, John, and I started Stanberry 20 years ago to develop quality retail lifestyle centers, and the Shops at Union Hill on Route 10 in Denville was our first project when it opened in 2003. We purchased the vacant parcel, I should say the vacant office buildings, Intel Dialogic at 1515 Route 10, roughly 4 years ago. It was February 2015, with the vision of creating a mixed-use version of the Shops at Union Hill. And over the last 4 years, we've been working to merge our vision for 1515 with Parsippany's vision, and the result is not only a transformative mixed-use project that puts Parsippany on the millennial map, it is also a transformative financially for the town, as it will create $1 million annuity for Parsippany at stabilization that will grow to over $5 million annually towards the end of the 30-year pilot. In total, roughly $50 million and more will be paid to the town via the pilot over the 30 years than if the property was to remain a office building and we were to fill that office building, vacant office building, with office tenants. How is that possible, you say? It's possible with 4 years of very difficult and intense negotiations between Stanberry and visionary town leaders who see the opportunity to make significant Route 10 traffic improvements, address the town's affordable housing needs, and stem the tide of corporate office tenants flocking to the millennial havens of Hoboken, Jersey City, and your Morris County neighbor, Morristown. However, without utilizing the redevelopment tools provided by the state, this project would not be possible. Let me be clear, in order for this project to address the town's affordable housing needs and the Route 10 improvements, a pilot is needed. A no vote on the pilot is a no vote on the district at 1515. No COA, no traffic improvements, no town center, and no to the additional $50 million in revenue. A no vote is, in essence, a yes vote to maintain the current office vacancy rates in Parsippany. To date, the following affirmative actions have been taken. Parsippany has declared the parcel an area in need of redevelopment. Parsippany has approved the redevelopment plan. Parsippany has approved the redevelopment agreement outlining the terms of the pilot and the RAB. Parsippany has amended the redevelopment plan to reduce the unit sizes on first reading, and they have approved the financial agreement on first reading. Tonight we are here for the second reading of those two ordinances. The benefits of this project are many. Regarding the COA Affordable Housing Plan, we are officially an interested party, not an intervener. Parsippany's ongoing lawsuit with Fair Share Housing. We continue to cooperate and are currently included in the town's plan, or we believe we are. The district at 1515 will provide 34 affordable units on site and will pay a total of $3.3 million into the town's affordable housing fund. Regarding the NJDOT traffic improvements, what we like to call the Trenton Miracle. Township engineer Gordon Meth, this was probably 3 years ago, suggested the concept of tying our project into the Dryden Way jug handle as a way to reduce traffic at the State Route 10 202 intersection. NJDOT rarely permits private development to tie into their jug handles. Let's see if I can get my pointer working here. The concept here is a direct tie-in to the back of our project right here. Right now, traffic movements on Route 10 come this way, take the jug handle, and go around to the Matt Cali campus. What is being proposed here is reconstruction of this access road between Delta Dental and our property, creation of a roundabout here, a new roadway here between the Parsippany portion of the project and the Hanover portion of the project, another roundabout here, and like I said, a direct connection to the jug handle. This piece right here will go away. So what this does from a more regional, traffic improvement, all the traffic generated from these properties, the Octagon Building, Delta Dental, and the Intel Dialogic or the 1515 project. Any traffic coming from 287 needs to make their way through the Matt Cali campus, down, through the 202 intersection, around, and back down to get here. Otherwise, they come down this way, go up around Wendy's, come down. Either way, all that traffic is being placed on that intersection. What this does, it permits the traffic coming from 287 to flip around the jug handle, come under Route 10, and directly access the properties, solving a huge traffic issue, not only here, but for these workers and visitors to these projects. The other thing it does is it creates a direct connection between this side of Route 10 and the Matt Cali campus. So anybody here looking to go to Starbucks, the new Starbucks here, the Delta Dental Complex, or hopefully our restaurants and retailers here, is a direct connection now between the Matt Cali campus and this side of Route 10. Stanberry, Parsippany, and our neighbors at Delta Dental have all attended meetings at DOT in Trenton and assisted in the approval of this rare opportunity to improve the 202 intersection. We are currently sitting on a $250,000 proposal from Langen Engineering to prepare the final engineering plans for these improvements. Unfortunately, we can't release them until we have an affirmative vote. All roads within the development will either be owned and maintained by NJDOT in this area down here, or by the developer, these roads right here. There will be no, Parsippany will have no ownership or maintenance responsibilities. And this might be out of order a little bit. Go back to the town center slide. And I'll also use the model. Hopefully you have a chance to come up and take a look at the model that we prepared for the shopping center convention in New York City several weeks ago. But 1515 has been designed around a public town center known as a Wunderf. You can see this configuration right here. These are the first floor retail buildings on Route 10 with the second floor restaurant patios. We have currently on 2 liquor licenses we intend to employ here. You see those are the lower buildings right here. And then the multi-use buildings behind that, the ground floor is retail, the upper floors is residential. It creates this public space here that I'm referring to as a Wunderf. The Wunderf is a Dutch design term that permits vehicular traffic, but it's designed to be secondary to the pedestrian, which is important here. Tenants are being carefully curated to provide a variety of dining options to cover breakfast, lunch, dinner, full service, and casual dining experiences. Boutique fitness concepts like spinning and yoga, all intended to activate the town center via outside dining, outside exercise classes, and communal public events. The main portion of the town center, once again, the portion you see right here, is being designed with the ability to easily close access to vehicular traffic for regular events such as Sunday morning farmers markets, arts festival, food truck festivals. The idea is to totally dedicate this over to the pedestrian experience for special events. We have had exploratory meetings with the Parsippany Parks and Recreation Department regarding collaborating on events, large and small, some existing, some new. Based on the initial meeting, we have generated a wish list to populate a full calendar of events. Some ours solely, some in collaboration with the town. Much work needs to be done, but it was certainly a great start. 1515, this town center concept is also important to note that this project is being specifically designed to attract millennials and empty nesters. Smaller units, more amenitized common space, and most importantly, the ability to walk downstairs for a cup of coffee, a yoga class, a concert or movie in the square, dinner or drinks with friends, something you cannot currently do in all of Parsippany. The town center component of this project is a really big deal. Regarding the pilot, make sure this is the first slide here. Regarding the pilot, we view this as another huge benefit to the town. It's highly complex, lots of legal documents to pour through, lots of calculations, but the end result is a huge benefit to the town. It's important to note that this project is, in total, is a $200 million project that will need to generate a 6.5% return in order to attract significant capital that will be needed for commercially viable bank financing. That's an important point. The property currently generates $430,000 in annual taxes, of which roughly $90,000 goes to Parsippany. The mandatory minimum pilot payment, which has been negotiated, would increase revenue to Parsippany to over $1 million annually at stabilization, growing each year to over $5 million towards the end of the pilot. And what is shown here, the bottom line is the number of years, 1 through 30. This is revenue from $500,000 up to $6 million. The red line you see here is the projected taxes of the stabilized office. So this isn't the vacant office building that sits there today. What this shows is the revenue generated if we were to lease that building again, as it was when Dialogic was filling the whole building. So that's Parsippany's portion of that tax. What's shown here is what we call the mandatory minimum payment after the RAB. So this is what's been negotiated as a guaranteed minimum payment to the town. It ramps up in the later years as we get closer to the end of the pilot and full taxes. So from what that means number-wise, this column on a year-by-year basis is the minimum projected pilot payment. This red column is the projected taxes of the stabilized office. Over here you see the difference. You can see year by year. With this you get down to around year 8 or 9, you start getting close to $1 million. You hit $1 million in year 12. So in this particular model, year 12, there's $1 million more coming to the town there with this project and with this pilot than there would be with no pilot and the existing office building. In total, close to $50 million down in the bottom right is the aggregate difference. Now, this similar graph, but this one shows the greater of the pilot or the minimum payment. Now this gets a little complicated, but the pilot revenue is based on revenue. So early in the pilot, our revenues are projected to be higher, generate a higher pilot payment than the minimum payment. Somewhere in this neighborhood, it switches over so that the minimum payment is required over the projected revenues. This is the best case scenario for both, for the town. So it shows the higher pilot payments per the revenue, and it shows the higher minimum payments towards the end. Once again, compared to the office building taxes. You see here, you get to year 3, and it's $1 million different in taxes to the town. In total, it's a $60 million difference over 30 years. The pilot for this project allows this project to create a much larger and much meaningful long-term rateable for the township, and permits the project to bear an otherwise undue burden of community benefits, the co-obligation, the NJDOT improvements. It is important to note again that this project cannot happen without the pilot, and it's important to also note again that the pilot is required due to extraordinary costs requested of the project, specifically the COA and the Route 10 improvements. How are we doing on time, Colin?
You're totally fine. Take your time. No problem at all. We're all right. I'll let you know.
Good. Well, I will draw my conclusion then. In conclusion, we have talked to a number of people. We have met with as many people as possible regarding this project. Decision makers, interested parties, general public, and we spent the past weekend with our team really trying to understand these concerns and answer the questions and address them. We have included printouts on the front table here that if you're interested, please come up and get. That we tried to assemble all the questions and concerns we've heard. We've answered them to the best of our ability, and we've footnoted those answers with specific places in the legal documents that address those concerns. We are available for questions. We welcome the opportunity to further discuss this transformative opportunity that literally sits right here in front of us. So any questions, happy to answer now, or whatever's at the council's pleasure. Not sure where logistically
Council
we
members
go
have
from here.
questions?
Do the council?
Any council members have?
Yeah, can I
questions?
just ask you, year 1, when does year 1 it doesn't begin, when does year 1 begin? It doesn't begin right out, is that, you said at stabilization, does year 1 begin?
Yeah, that's a
So
good
that's a
question.
legal
Year-
question that I think I can probably help with.
Yeah, year 1 is at stabilization phase 1. I think that
Right.
it mentioned the phasing of the
Year
project.
one- the pilot period begins at the time the project is deemed to be substantially complete.
And that's estimated at, do we have an estimate on that?
That's typically tied to the issuance of the first CO or TCO for the building.
So that could be out about 3 or 4 years? is
So the
that-
construction schedule will defer to,
Yeah, so we're looking at breaking ground later next fall that would be for late 2021, spring 2022. Is that correct? Yes. Grand opening. But that's phase 1. It's important to note that's also included in these projections is when phase 2 would come online. So at the conclusion of phase 1, which is the blocks of building closest to me, the grayer buildings farther away that don't have the detail is the phase 2 portion, which includes a large parking garage in the back corner.
Right, so then we would receive the 435 up until that point, is that?
so what will happen is that once a demolition permit is pulled and all the existing improvements are raised, right, demolished, the property will only pay land tax, just as any other project that the improvements have been demolished on would. And then once the project undergoes construction and is deemed to be substantially complete and the TCO or CO is issued, then the pilot kicks in.
And is that, does it change as vacant land when the building is leveled?
Yeah, what will happen is the assessor will take the improved value of the property off the tax bill because the improvements no longer exist and you just pay the land tax.
So that'll be for a period of roughly 18 months during the
Right.
demolition and construction.
Right. And then, I guess that was it. Oh, and the RAB payment, when does that begin then? Does that begin at year 1?
Okay, well, I think that depends on when the RAB is issued, and I think we should probably defer to council for the redeveloper as to the timing of the RAB payments.
Yeah, I will
Yeah.
say that these projections have taken the RAB out already.
Into
This is
account,
after
so-
the RAB payment.
All right, I don't want to talk out of school here, but presumably that's going to be tied with substantial completion of the project.
Okay.
But it is also important to note, you mentioned the $430,000 payment. That is our total tax bill. The town's portion of that is roughly $90,000.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, the balance is the school
the
portion.
school, the county, right?
But that's what, about 70, 80%?
In Parsippany, depending on the year, between 60 and 65% of your tax dollar goes to the school board.
And 92, in this case, 92,000 goes to the township, to the
township.
municipality.
Correct, right. You know,
Okay.
the township gets rough dollar because the county also gets a cut, all right? You know, the township gets about 22 or 23%.
Right. But we don't get the minimum payment, so when the RAB payment begins, is that at that full amount, even though the,
So I believe what the chart shows is the payment minus what is already removed in order to service the debt on the RAB bond.
okay.
I think Janice is, just to clarify, your question is there a period in time where we are paying towards the RAB, but we haven't started to collect on the payments to the town?
No.
Well, yeah,
Mr. Potchman, the number of COA units that you're proposing in Phase 1 and Phase 2?
I'm not 100% sure of the phasing. It's a mathematical calculation.
Okay. I received information on Saturday night, which I read on Sunday. And we have a total of 33 units built within the project, with 21 in Phase 1 and 12 in Phase 2.
That sounds about right.
Okay? All right. Thank you. Thank you.
So I'll just answer your question, Councilwoman. My notes say, with respect to Phase 1, and this may change, I think, with the actual construction plan, 1 mixed-use building in Phase 1, 2 retail buildings in Phase 1, consisting of approximately 64,000 square feet of retail space, 273 residential units. My notes say of which 252 will be market rate units and 21 will be affordable units. Does
sounds-
that sound more or less right?
Yes.
That's the information I
Right,
received.
okay, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
thank you.
Any other questions from the public? Okay, so you have questions. Council President, are we going to take questions now, or we're going to wait till the end, or we're going to have them just speak to them in the back?
Yeah, why don't we have, you guys, you're gonna be here, right?
Sure.
So you can
Yeah.
answer one-on-one questions for the public in case, you know, because we have a 5-minute time limit. There may be some more people that want to speak to you
Absolutely.
more than 5 minutes.
Yes.
Why can't we let them speak now, right after the presentation?
Okay.
There's
We
also
can.
a
On
public
this
hearing.
topic only?
Okay, well,
There's also a public hearing on this ordinance, so.
Well, keep in mind, yeah, we're going to have 2 ordinances. There's going to be 2 public
yeah,
hearings
we have
on
a
these,
public
so they
hearing
could
on
speak
this.
then, or they could speak now, whatever the council wishes.
Well, I thought this was the question and
Mhm.
answer period for them. They can speak later, but they won't have question and answer.
We can, if Council President, that's your
Sure.
call, if you'd like to do that.
let's do it now.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll put aside right now a very small portion. Anyone who would like to come up with the 5-minute time limit with regards to, you would ask any questions you want, and then Stanberry will answer the questions. We are not going to engage in a back and forth dialogue, so we'll do it as you guys would do it during public session.
Just wait until they're done with their, if they have more than one question, let them ask all their questions and then you can answer them. So we don't have back
Best of
and
my
forth.
ability, yes, sir.
Okay. So at this point, we'll entertain questions. Come on up, Nick. Yeah, Nick, come in.
Mike? There you go, Nick.
You're calling the Route 10 traffic with the roundabouts. I understood that roundabouts are being phased out in other states for safety reasons and accidents, but you're saying it's an improvement. Isn't it more of an accommodation just for that development, just for your proposal for the the businesses and the people living there. So why is it being called an improvement and not an accommodation? And how will that accommodation, has there been any traffic studies? And especially concerned that the roundabouts and the delays in that area, and what, besides the roundabout and the diversion, what other additives to this so-called improvement is there?
Is that
all your question?
Sure. I don't have the mic's on, but there's Langen Engineering has done reams and reams of study and presented those to NJDOT. First, they meet with NJDOT to determine the amount of traffic, how much traffic is going to be generated, and what direction those trips are going to come and go from. They put it into a model. That's then presented back to NJDOT. So that tells NJDOT and our engineers where the stress points are that needs to be addressed. And in doing so, they identified the 202 intersection, no big surprise, as one of the areas that is of major concern. What this, as I alluded to earlier, what this does is it takes all the traffic coming from 287, coming from the east, that would go to these projects off of that intersection. So it's a big improvement to reducing trips on that intersection. Regarding the roundabouts, I'm not the biggest fan of roundabouts, but this was a combination of a DOT request that they thought that this was the best way to handle this and meets their design standards. So this was done in collaboration with a whole team of engineers down in Trenton at NJDOT. This has been going on since very early on this project. So it's been back and forth with NJDOT and the town and Delta Dental. There's a big disruption to Delta Dental in their back corner of their parking lot. So we have agreement with them to make some improvements on their property to accommodate, replace their parking. But it's been a collaborative process that has gotten us to this point. Yes, it will directly benefit those three properties for sure, but it also has a big impact on the regional traffic impacts at the 202 intersection.
Just further on the roundabout issue, in my private practice, I do a fair amount of developer work at NJDOT. There's been some considerable rethinking at DOT over the last 10 years with respect to roundabouts and their appropriateness in some locations. Some of that rethinking is driven by traffic volumes and also roadway speed. And the most recent one that I'm familiar with, where I represented an adjacent property owner, is in Newark on Haynes Avenue and 1 and 9, which is a pretty heavily traveled roadway at a fairly significant speed. And you are starting to see more roundabouts, particularly in commercial shopping centers. So as I said, there was a time when the roundabout configuration was somewhat disfavored, but it seems to be back in vogue now in some instances.
Mr. Rosenthal, you have a question?
Yeah, Richard Rosenthal. Oh, I forgot the microphone's over here.
Your address.
I'm looking.
Your address, Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes, I'm directly in. Directly in traffic.
No, your address.
3 Cambridge Road, Morris Plains. That's another story. One of these days I'll live in Parsippany. I'm looking at the turn going into the Cali. I made it just today. To me, it was a great sweep, no traffic. Made the turn. It looks to me I'll be going 50 miles an hour. All the traffic going 50 miles on Route 10. It looks like we're going to have to make a sharp right turn to go in. Whereas before you have look at the turn and look at the other. And for those of us who have made the turn from Route 10 going across the road, going further down. It's a nice wide turn going in there, and you have that part. Is that turn going to remain?
It's going to remain, yes.
Okay, but all we did was we continued on the circle. So now you have us coming to the end, stopping, going around the circle. No, go to the right.
Yes, so
Yeah,
right
now,
today
okay,
you go
stop.
here.
Now we made the right turn. Yeah, you're getting rid of that. That was the easy part.
That's
Now you're
correct.
making us go into a traffic circle and come out.
That's correct. You're going around the circle.
And that's better?
Back around.
No.
Just state your name and address.
Elaine Cooper, 55 Farron Drive. You've shown us the perimeter traffic setup. I'd like to see what the interior traffic setup looks like and your parking plans. Do you have them tonight?
Well, these little red stars indicate entrances to the project. There's a 2 to 3 level parking deck underneath this building, underneath this one. This is a 6-level parking deck, the building in the back corner, this one. And then this building also has parking underneath it. The concept is all the surface level parking, including under this building and this building, will be for the retail guests. The upper levels will be for the residential. That's right here. Let me go back to this slide. This whole area here, as I referred to as the Wooner, is being designed to really slow down the pedestrian traffic. It'll be very obvious that pedestrian has the right-of-way in this situation. There will be bollards placed in these areas to keep so the vehicular traffic knows where they need to go. There'll be perpendicular parking, very little, but in this area, the special pavement area here is where the main traffic will go. Once again, it's to give the retailers really the, how to say this, they're very concerned about vehicular parking, and getting them to face inwards to the project versus out towards Route 10 is a big lift for us, and it's taken a lot of convincing to do that, but it's very critical for the success of the town center portion. So we've had success in that by presenting this concept. And the way it's designed, let me see the best way to show you here. Vehicular traffic can go all the way around the project here, permitting us to close the road down here and right here to create a totally pedestrian zone here, as I mentioned, for special events.
Ken Dolsky, 21 Winfield Drive. Are the payments to Parsippany in any way, shape, or form dependent upon your occupancy rate? What if we had a recession, a deep recession, in the next 2 or 3, 5 years, and and you couldn't rent half the place?
The minimum payments are mandatory. They're not based on revenue. If we don't make those payments, the pilot, is my understanding, council can correct me, the pilot gets torn up and we revert back to normal taxes.
So it could happen, but then there wouldn't be a project, or then you would be on your own in terms of having to pay your taxes and.
Well, we're paying regardless. We're either paying the minimum payment per the pilot, or we're paying the normal taxes that the assessor will tell us what the bill is and we'll pay it. So if for some reason we're not making the minimum payment, we then revert back to the normal taxes.
So in the event that the minimum payment's not made, the agreement then goes into default, and then by operation of law, the agreement terminates, and the property goes back to the tax roll.
And is that better or worse for us?
It all depends on what the assessed valuation of the property is at the time that there's a default.
Wouldn't we know the assessed value before this
Well, it's,
starts?
you know, the assessed value will fluctuate somewhat based on the income potential of the property. Now, that's a determination for the assessor to make every year.
Okay, thank you.
I can tell you, we owned the shops in Union Hill for, I don't know, 15 years and never missed a payment, for what that's worth.
Okay, so no one else come forward? All right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Continuing under the Business Administrator's report, we have a presentation this evening from Leslie London and Edward Snikes regarding the Council on Affordable Housing Obligation. Just to bring the Council up to speed, we do have a hard deadline of February of 2019 to submit our affordable housing plan to the Superior Court here in Morris County. So Leslie and Ed are here to bring us up to speed on that progress.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, members of the public. We hope this evening to provide general information to you that covers affordable housing in New Jersey that's been going on for more than 40 years, and we are going to provide it to you tonight in hopefully 40 minutes. So it's a lot of information, and feel free to have questions at the end if council permits. Again, my name is Leslie London. I'm your Affordable Housing Counsel. I am a partner with McManaman, Scotland & Bauman. Our firm is in Roseland, New Jersey. And I've handled several of these cases since the process began in 2015. And as your business administrator mentioned, the township is on a very tight time frame for preparing its affordable housing plan. And we are before a judge who is retiring in March of next year, and she has directed the remaining Morris County municipalities that have not resolved their cases to have them done before she retires. So that is our goal. Just a little bit of background information. Many of you may have, from newspaper articles and from things throughout the state, have heard of Mount Laurel Housing. It goes back as far as 1975, when the first decision came out regarding affordable housing. It followed several years later with Mount Laurel 2, and those two cases really set the groundwork for the obligation and the mandate that each township or municipality in New Jersey has a constitutional obligation to provide its fair share of affordable housing in the region. Mount Laurel 3 followed in 1986, which affirmed the validity of New Jersey's Fair Housing Act. And under the Fair Housing Act, COA, the Council on Affordable Housing, was created. It was established to provide rules and regulations to determine each municipality's affordable housing obligation and to certify plans that the township and municipalities would ultimately promulgate. Each township, Parsippany included, must prepare a housing element and fair share plan. It's mandatory, you don't have a choice. And that plan is to address how the municipality is going to meet its housing obligation for the period involved. COA over the years promulgated rules for the first and second rounds. They're generally on 10-year cycles. And in each of those rounds, the township did prepare timely reports and plans and received what's called substantive certification from COA. The third round came subsequently after that, and the township did prepare a third round plan and petitioned COA for substance certification on 2 occasions. During this time period, however, COA's rules were challenged. There was significant litigation that covered many years, and at one point the regulations and rules were found to be non-compliant by the court. The Fair Share Housing Center, which is the advocate for housing in New Jersey, filed the major lawsuit that culminated in the March 10th, 2015 Supreme Court decision, which is referred to as Mount Laurel 4. In that decision, ultimately, the Supreme Court said to the municipalities and to COA, COA, you have not done your job. You have not promulgated valid rules. I'm taking away your power. And the court gave the power back to, the Supreme Court gave power back to the local courts to determine the municipality's housing obligation. And judges were assigned and appointed in each vicinage to hear these cases. So this is back in March of 2015. The courts gave the municipalities up until July of that year to file what's called a declaratory judgment action with the Superior Court. And under that DJ action, the court would review the municipality's housing plan and determine whether or not that plan was constitutionally compliant with the state's Mount Laurel requirements. Courts were also authorized to give the municipality, if they timely filed, what's referred to as temporary immunity, and that would protect the municipalities against what's called builder remedy lawsuits. So back on July 8th, 2015, Parsippany timely filed their DJ action and was granted temporary immunity, which it continues to have to this day. Shortly thereafter, you had several interested parties and one intervener who sought to participate in the township's case. The Fair Share Housing Center is an automatic party. The developers who are in the case are interested in having a plan or a project included as part of the township's plan. The township has taken the position generally to sit down and at least hear from each of those developers who have come to it with a plan to see how that plan potentially could be part of the township's overall plan. So during this period also, Fair Share Housing engaged the services of Dr. Kinsey, a well-known consultant, and he prepared an analysis and report laying out, in his view, a methodology and determining what the obligation should be throughout the state. The obligation is based on regions, not individual municipalities. Parsippany Troy Hills is part of Region 2, and Region 2 takes into consideration Morris County, Essex County, Union County, and Warren County. So you can't just look at at Parsippany. The region is looked at in determining the obligation. Fair Share Housing Center's number for Parsippany Troy Hills was extremely high. Their number was 2,865 affordable units. And if you multiply that by 5, you get 14,325 total units. So in order to get affordable units, you need to have at least 5 times market units. So that's an extremely high number of units to be built over a 10-year period. What happened at that point was that the townships and municipalities got together and formed a municipal consortium. eConsult was the second consultant that was ultimately selected, and they prepared a solutions report. Their numbers for each of the municipalities was extremely low. So you had 2 levels of numbers, one very high, and on the other spectrum, one very low. The courts at that time also appointed special court masters to assist them in determining what numbers and obligations should be determined. The judges, for the most part, some of them had no background in land use and in planning, so they relied very heavily on court masters who are planners. The current the judge in this case is Judge Mary Ann Neergaard, as I mentioned, and she also appointed a regional court master, which was Richard Redding, to assist her. So the issue that came about was, what is the methodology to be used to determine a municipality's obligation? And also at this time, a second issue arose, whether there should be an additional obligation imposed on municipalities for the period of time that COA didn't act. Between 1999 and 2015, COA did not adopt a full set of rules, and that's referred to as the gap period. The municipalities, of course, argued that the gap numbers should not be added, and the developers and Fair Share Housing argued that they should. It was litigated all the way through the New Jersey Supreme Court, and ultimately the Supreme Court said, yes, those numbers or that obligation must be included. So now you have another obligation being imposed on the municipalities. So since 2015, each vicinages has been moving at different pace. You have some towns and municipalities moving very quickly, pushing for settlements. Middlesex County is one for an example. And at this point, we have approximately 250 municipalities that have settled and resolved their affordable housing plans. Mercer County was the one vicinage to actually have a full trial on what the methodology should be. And that trial lasted 40 days last year. But what was very important out of that case was you had the competing experts for 40 days talk about what the methodology should be. And ultimately, Judge Jacobson, in March of this year, issued her decision. It was over 200 pages. And she painstakingly went through what had happened in those 40 days and determined what methodology should be applied. And in determining that methodology, she had to look at the entire state. So numbers were produced and a methodology was available for each other county to look at for use. So Judge Jacobson's decision at this point remains undisturbed, and it has been used as the preferred methodology for each of the other vicinages. Judge Neergaard, who I mentioned is the judge for Parsippany, has adopted Judge Jacobson's methodology, and she had directed Richard Redding to apply the principles from that case for the Morris County municipalities. So in July of this year, Richard Redding issued a report to the judge which identified the number for each of the Morris County municipalities. Parsippany was listed as 1,313 affordable units for the period 1999 through 2025. So that's the number that's out there, at least for purposes of the court at this point. I put this chart together for a point of comparison. When you look at the entire state of New Jersey, there are 25 municipalities that have an obligation number over 1,000. As you can see, Parsippany has at 1313. There are 10 more municipalities throughout the state that are higher than Parsippany. The highest one, Toms River, at 2,491. And again, these are affordable units. This chart shows where Parsippany is in relation to other Morris County municipalities. And of course, Parsippany, being the largest municipality in the county, has the largest obligation. But this chart also shows those municipalities in the county that have 500 unit obligations, and there are at least 10 other municipalities, including Parsippany, that meet that criteria. The closest one to you is Hanover at 897. So the COA rules provide mechanisms to the municipalities to address that number. The number can be reduced by various factors, one including a vacant land adjustment analysis to look at whether or not there is land enough to build these units. Mr. Snickes will go into more detail about that analysis. Ed and I and our working team over the past probably 7 months or so have been working very aggressively and regularly with the Fair Share Housing Center and the court's master to determine what's called a realistic development potential for the township. What is realistic for the township? Yes, you say it's 1313, but is that a realistic number? And it takes into consideration various factors. So we are in negotiation with the Fair Share Housing Center. We are very close to finalizing what I refer to as the RDP, the realistic development potential number for the township. And it's looking to be around the range of 850 to 1,000 affordable units for the period 2015 through 2025. Now, this is a significant reduction from Fair Share's initial number and even from Judge Jacobson's methodology at 1313. So you have a number, and there are still other factors that come into consideration to bring that number even further down. And I refer to it as a toolbox. You have currently in the township various apartments. Some of them may be deemed affordable and can be used for crediting purposes, which Ed will get into, to help bring down the number. Actions that the municipality took in the past, some may be taken into consideration to bring your number down. Again, Mr. Snickes will get into detail about those. But the other tools in your toolbox to address your housing number includes inclusionary zoning. This would be similar to the project that's before you, where you have market units being built, and in those, as part of that market unit project, some of the units are put aside for affordable housing. Then you have 100% affordable projects. That's where a private entity or even a municipality can sponsor a 100% project. You have some where you have veterans housing. I know in one municipality that I work in, they've done 100% for homeless veterans, so something like that would count. There's a market to affordable program that you can use. That's where you take market units and you use some of your money from your Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and you take that market unit and give a subsidy to the landlord, who can then bring the rent down lower to have it available as an affordable unit. That unit would then be deed restricted for a period of time and would count towards your number. The benefit of that type of program is that it saves you from having to build new units, and you can take units that are currently out there and just make them lower so that it can be affordable. We have CGP&H, who's working with the township right now to identify market units that exist in the township that could possibly fit that program. Group homes, that's usually for a group home where beds will count disability, people with disabilities. Accessory apartments could be a house that has an apartment over the garage that you make affordable. And then zoning mechanisms, which Mr. Snickes will get into. Overlay zoning and zoning, or requiring if someone builds a multi-family unit, they have to include affordable units as part of that. So our task has been to look at our number and see what are those mechanisms that are up there that we can use and to best fit a plan for the township. When looking at sites for potential, especially new housing, the housing has to meet what's called the ABOLs, because all that ends in a bowl. Available, meaning clear title, free of encumbrances. Suitable, adjacent to compatible land uses that has access to appropriate streets, consistent with environmental policies. Developable, access to appropriate water and sewer infrastructure. Approvable, and it may be developed, although not currently zoned for low and moderate income housing. So priority is given to sites where infrastructure is currently or imminently available. Procedurally, what happens next? We have a deadline that is kind of hanging over the township of February to get a plan, at least a sketch of a plan together to present to the court and to enter into hopefully a settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing. We are finalizing very shortly the vacant land adjustment and RDP number. That number hopefully will be finalized within the next 2 weeks or so. And as I mentioned, it's ranging right now between $850 and $1,000. We're trying to bring it down as low as we can. We have to finalize the selection of the mechanisms for inclusion in the toolbox. So that means we have to look at the projects that are out there that are being proposed to the township to see which projects fit best for the township. As I mentioned, we have at least 10 projects that have been proposed to the township. So council will be tasked with looking at those projects and determining which projects fit best for the plan. And again, our goal and our mandate is to meet that affordable housing number. And ultimately enter into a settlement agreement with the Fair Share Housing Center. Now, what might happen along the way is that every project may not get in the plan, which is not unusual. As long as the township meets its obligation number, then that is what counts. There are other mechanisms for projects to come to fruition, but every project may or may not be able to be part of the plan. And again, that's a decision that council will be making. We will have a fairness hearing regarding the settlement agreement with Judge Neergard. And at that hearing, the township will be required to present its plan to the judge, saying, Judge, this is our plan and how we plan, or how we will be meeting our obligation number. Ed Snickers, as the planner, will be justifying that plan. It will be tested. The developers who are part of the case will or may challenge some of what is in the plan. And that's the purpose of the hearing. The public is free to come to the hearing. The judge will listen. Fair Share Housing will make their presentation, and the court master will chime in also about the plan. And ultimately, the judge will determine whether or not the township has met its constitutional obligation. Assuming that happens at the fairness hearing, the judge will set a schedule for the township to actually prepare its plan, which is the more detailed document laying out timeframes for the projects, and also to adopt the plan, which will go to the planning board, and a spending plan. And the spending plan will be how the township anticipates spending funds from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. During this period also, the township will adopt any ordinances that will be required or needed to help effectuate some of these projects, because some projects currently are not zoned for housing, and ordinances will need to be adopted to provide for that housing. And once all of that is done, we go back to court, and for the court to give final approval and certify the township's plan and give the township immunity to cover it until 2025, and then you start all over again. until the legislature does something different. And once the plan is certified, there will be mechanisms in place for follow-up by Fair Share Housing. Usually it's 2 years after the plan is approved to make sure that the township is in fact doing what it's supposed to do. And I can tell you the developers will be watching to make sure that you are, because if you're not, they will easily go to the court and say they're not doing what they're supposed to do. So finally, failure to act. If the township decides to do nothing, and I put dollar signs there because that's the result. There will be numerous lawsuits, which can be very, very costly. And it will come from various ways. Fair Share Housing will seek to sue you. The developers will seek to sue you. And the court may hold you in contempt for not acting in good faith. A key example, or the poster child for a municipality who falls into that or fell into that, was South Brunswick. They are the only municipality in Middlesex that did not settle. In that case, Judge Wolfson was very aggressive with the municipalities, and he found that the township, in his view, was not acting in good faith and proceeding to adopt a timely plan, and was not acting in good faith. And as a result, I would say easily $1 million has been spent by the municipality fighting lawsuits with the developers. And as a result, most importantly, the township's plan will not be that selected by its elected officials, meaning the council or the planning board. The judge took away the power of the township council and took away the power of the planning board to decide what their plan will be, and gave it to a new court master with the developers giving their input. So a plan is being developed in South Brunswick without the municipality's input. The problem or the concern that anyone should have about that is you lose control. The council has no control, planning board has no control, and the developers are in the driving seat. And that's the end result if the township fails to do anything or fails to come forward with a compliant plan. So we hope not to be in that situation, because if you are not the one in control, you don't control the density, you don't control where the projects go, how big are the projects. You want to be in control and determine what your plan will be. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
Question?
very much.
Okay.
Any questions? Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
Council members have any?
Let's assume we've made all our numbers and everybody's happy. The judge is happy, the courts are happy. We made our number. People move into these moderate low-income units, all right? One of them decides to leave or move, go to Florida, whatever. Who decides who moves into that apartment? Who determines whether they're qualified economically? Ongoing, how does this get enforced and administered?
Yes, you have an administrative agent. The company that I showed up there, CGP&H, if you retain them as your administrative agent, right now they're serving as a consultant, that's their job. They keep a tally of those units that have been deemed for low and moderate. They keep a list. There's documentation that has to be provided to prove that you meet the income qualifications, and they do follow-up. So there is a mechanism in place to do that.
Okay, now, is that for the whole region, the three or four counties that you mentioned?
The person who does this?
No, what I'm thinking of is if somebody at the far end, 4 counties away, is the next one in line to get an apartment, do they have to come all the way up here? Or is there some sanity check on where they are and how far they can travel?
The list that Mr. Gottesman has is a list, you can't set aside only for Parsippany residents by
Understood.
law.
Yep.
It's by region. So he keeps the list and whoever's next on the list. So that it's a fair process. So the sooner you get on the list, the better.
Okay.
And then the municipality can market. There's ways to help encourage people who do live in town to get on the list, and through your marketing efforts.
Let me give you one more example. This is real now. I've had 2 phone calls in the last 6 months. These women were living in apartments. Their husbands passed away. With their 2 Social Security checks, they could afford to pay the rent. Now, husband passed away, they have 1 Social Security check. They can't make the payment anymore. Is there any way we could fold something like that into this program?
I think we can work on something like that. With the expert that we have, there are other programs that may be of assistance that we could incorporate as part of the program.
Yeah, this is a very real issue.
Yes.
2 in the last 6 months I've encountered. we
And the
couldn't
goal
help them.
is to try to have as many affordable units available in that type of situation. I'm sure with the help of our expert and others, we can find a way to make it work.
I was wondering if we could use our low-income
fund?
trust fund and subsidize that person's rent and let her stay right where she was when she raised her children.
That's something to be looked at, because you have various ways and different ways that you can use your trust fund monies, and buying down and providing subsidies are included as part of that list, so that's something that we could look at.
Okay, thank you.
In the, sorry, go ahead. In the Market to Affordable program, there had been a conversation about a ratio where it wasn't a 1-to-1 credit, that there were weighted credits for if we went through with this program specific to the 1515 development, the units that were Market to Affordable would count as 3 units, not just 1 affordable unit. Is that still part of this calculation with 1515? 2-to-1?
No, it's 5-to-1.
I can answer your question.
5-to-1.
He's the numbers guy.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and they are complicated, believe me. What you were addressing was the issue of bonus credits. You can get a certain number of bonus credits. They are capped, so there's caveats with everything, but they are capped. So you can get a 2-for-1 credit when they are in fact rental units available to for low and moderate income. But yet it can't be more than 25%. Those credits, those additional bonus credits, can't be more than 25% of the total amount of the need that we establish, or RDP, as you hear me talk about in a minute as well.
Also, Ed, Mr. Snikes, excuse me, has Section 8 apartments been calculated in our numbers, or they're not feasible?
It depends. If the units are deed restricted, or if there's some sort of agreement that allows a certain time period for them to be restricted, they would then qualify for that. And that's one important question that people often ask. Is Section 8 affordable housing? It can be, but affordable housing is not necessarily Section 8 housing. What you're looking at is density bonuses and developments to help subsidize the cost and the infrastructure that's necessary to put in place to build those affordable units. So it's a way of going through zoning, this inclusionary zoning process, to help subsidize the housing. They're not getting a federal stipend assisting their rents and things of that nature. It's due to the type of development that's being proposed, such as Stanford.
Thank you.
And then wasn't there a difference between, I think we talked about that at another meeting, where it was affordable versus low income, and there's a difference between the two, right?
There is a difference between moderate low, and very low. There's 3 categories of affordable
Right.
that we have to meet. And so that, you'll hear me talk about in a moment as I show a table. It breaks it down based upon income levels. It can't be more than 30%. They can't pay more than 30% of their income towards housing. And that's how it's multiplied or calculated. And that's specifically income levels. There's a certain number of units in a development that would have to be for very low, and moderate income. So it does have regulations associated with it.
And are
And there
they-
are rules we're following in order to meet those regulations.
And they're calculated the same.
And I think it's important to note, too, that people who would qualify for these units are people who have a salary, who have an income, and it's aimed for people coming right out of school, maybe trying first job, and sometimes even teachers, income people who don't make a lot of money, that can't find a nice apartment. So the goal is to make those apartments or make some apartments available. You may think that you have a lot of apartments in your township, but the key is how many of them are affordable based on the income limits. And I had our expert check as of a couple of weeks ago how many units in Parsippany are currently vacant and available for someone that's considered affordable, and there was none. So right now, there are no affordable units vacant available for someone to come into Parsippany that meet those
And that's what I
limits.
found out for the 2 women at Coldwing.
Yeah.
One more question you just brought up. What if you take the teacher that's just starting salary, she falls into one of these categories, but a couple of years later, she's making more?
She's gonna leave.
She's still staying.
Does she get evicted?
No.
Well, then it's no longer a moderate or low-income housing
That's right.
unit.
The restriction is still there.
But they could, depending upon their yearly income and their assets. Let's say, for instance,
Right.
their assets change over time, which many can. There is a yearly accounting of
Right.
that, and that's something the administrator has to take a look at.
That's
So that
true.
person might be replaced out of that unit. There's a certain time
Could be
period
evicted, yeah.
involved in that eviction or replacement, let's call it.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to use those heavy.
We're not gonna throw them out. They're gonna be
You're
replaced.
talking about throwing out a
Replaced.
teacher.
Yeah, that's true. There is a process
Yes.
involved.
They're not terminated.
They're not
evicted.
terminated, okay.
And does compliance with the Highlands Council reduce our number in any way, our obligation?
That's very difficult to say at this point in time, because what you look at typically, and it's sort of jumping into my next part of my presentation.
yeah, so
maybe I
Should we
Just
wait,
wanna
should
do
we
that.
wait and let you present?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
if I can go through that, you'll hear about some of the criteria we're looking at under what's called an adjustment to our number.
Ed, if you could please speak into the mic.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Ed, just a quick question in reference to that.
Yes.
Can you answer this before you start? Is there a possibility that us joining the Highlands would have an effect on the number?
Can I answer that? From a legal perspective, we are already in the case, so the train has already left. So it would not affect your 3rd round obligation, potentially your 4th round, since that starts 2026, because there is a time period and a process to get into the Highlands.
Okay.
And at this point, since this case goes back to 2015, in no way will the judge put this case on hold to wait for the Highlands analysis, and in no way will the developers sit still and allow you to wait another year.
Okay.
So you'll be embroiled in litigation.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. For those that don't know me, my name is Ed Snikus. I'm with the firm of Burgess Associates. We represent Parsippany Troy Hills as your housing planner. We work closely with the municipal planner, Susan Favette, who was mentioned earlier. What I'll be going through, as Leslie was talking about, there are some mechanisms available to the municipality to evaluate what is your realistic amount of development that the municipality can actually absorb. And one of those processes is called vacant land analysis. And we look at the entire municipality, we look at the available land that's available to the community so that we can assess and arrive at what's reasonable. What is that realistic development potential number for the community? Because as was pointed out a moment ago, even at 1313, that's a significant number of units for a municipality to absorb. Even though Parsippany is at a crossroads of major interstate roadways and state highways, it still is a significant number for us to have to address and deal with it. What the rules do allow for, and when I address the rules, what I'm talking about are rules that actually were not overturned by the court, but are specifically applicable to a plan. And you're allowed to look at those rules and apply adjustment factors to what is realistic in the community. So we went through an entire vacant land adjustment factor and mapping. And what you're seeing here is a series of maps that I'll page through. This is sort of the westerly quadrant of Parsippany. You also have your central quadrant and your northern areas and also the southern area. But what's interesting to note is that in the rules, they allow you to look at and consider environmental features, environmental factors. We were just talking about the pylons a minute ago. What we are looking at is wetlands, areas of wetlands. Those can be excluded from your vacant land adjustment. Areas of open space that's preserved. So if you have something that's on your recreation open space inventory, that can be excluded from an analysis. But they do require you to look at all municipal land, even Board of Education lands, to see if in fact if those lands are developable and accountable towards a realistic development potential. Now these are not sites that we're looking at for specific affordable housing locations. It's just what is that available land after you factor out all these features. So as you see, we have a total land area of about 16,000 acres in Parsippany. The vacant land parcels accounted for about 5,200 acres of that land. From that 5,200 acres, we actually were able to identify and parse down that Parsippany has developable land towards your vacant land RDP of about 152 acres. So you'll see through that process, we were able to filter out what is in fact developable and not developable from the standpoint of the COA rules. When you have that information, you then can plug it into your vacant land assessment. So you can arrive at what is that number, that need number. And then what you were also required to do by the rules, and believe me, this has been a difficult process for us to go through, is other properties such as lands with development potential. You look at plant nurseries, garden centers, you look at farms or similar activities or similar locations. It's required by the rules. You also have to factor in whether or not you have any golf courses. Fortunately, our golf courses are either owned by an entity that doesn't qualify as a available golf course. But if the golf course was owned by its members, like a membership-owned golf course, you have to factor that into your vacant land adjustment and your RDP calculation, which is pretty startling when people hear that.
Our golf courses were bought with Green Acres money, so they're exempt.
That's what makes it exempt, and so we're able to factor that property out. Existing developments considered with additional development potential. This is where it gets dicey. When you look at areas within the community where these properties are, is there the ability to potentially, and I'm using the small r, not the larger R, redevelopment that you may have heard about tonight for the Stanberry development. But when a property redevelops, if it's changing from one use to another, it's called redevelopment. And in that scenario, that is something that Fair Share Housing Center, along with the court master, requires us to take a look at. And that is also factored into your RDP. And so with that, we feel confident that we'll be reducing that overall need number from the 1,313 units to between 850 and to 1,000. The reason why we have that range in there is there's still a number of factors for us to consider and parse this down. But we wanted to give you an idea of how we are stepping and adjusting that number so that it becomes more of an approachable number for the township. And I use that lightly as far as approachable, because we understand these things will have impacts. We understand there needs to be a lot of critical thought and planning that goes into any conceptual plan that's put together for the community. But as Leslie had pointed out, we don't like our options. We don't have another option. We have to go through this process, we have to do our planning, and we have to factor it in. But it all has to be done in a weighing factor, and that's planning in a nutshell. Of the obligation, you'll see that there's things that, and these are some of the phrases I want people to start to hear about as we talk about them in the public. There's parts of the overall need, and not just of the 1313, but there are separate numbers in the overall need number that was not touched on earlier. One of them is called a rehabilitation need. That's indigenous or existing homes within the community that need to be rehabilitated, that may not have, let's say, electrical systems that are up to code, roofing systems that need to be replaced, things of that nature. What the rules require us as a municipality to do is plan for and provide mechanisms to rehabilitate those existing units within the community. And so that number is 189. Prior round obligation, that's the period between 1987 and 1999. That's identified as 664 units. That has been consistent, either whether it was Fair Share Housing Center computing that number, or Mr. Redding computing that number for Judge Niergard. So that number remains as a prior need. Our prior 2 rounds of plans had mechanisms to address that 664 units. Some of those mechanisms were challenged recently by Fair Share Housing Center, but we're looking to address that need affirmatively. As Leslie pointed out a moment ago, we do have the gap period and what's called prospective need, which is grouped together called the 3rd round need. I know these are a lot of new phrases for some, but that is something that you just need to know the general background. Of that gap period and prospective need, that part adds up to the 1313. So you can see how Mr. Redding computed that number from the time periods involved. So with that, we're looking to reduce that down again to the RDP number. The rehabilitation share at 196 units, how we're addressing that. We already currently have a community development block grant program that helps finance our ability to rehabilitate units. Since 1996, you'll see we had 35 units. Rehab from 1996 to 2010, we had another 84. And rehab from 2010 to 2016, which is some of the current reporting that we have, is an additional 35 units. That's a total of 154 units towards that 196 units of existing indigenous need. So that leaves us for the remaining rehabilitation need of 42 units. I mention these numbers only so you understand as we present this in the public, that there's an understanding that we have this rehabilitation aspect to our plan. And we do have affirmative components in our plan that we're working through using some of our trust fund monies to dedicate towards rehabilitation. But this might be a program that helps people in need, whether they're restricted income people that was mentioned a moment ago who need to replace their roof, but they're income qualified. They don't have the income in order to afford the replacement of that roof. The rehabilitation component or plan can help finance that improvement to someone's home. So that's rehabilitation aspect. The prior round plan, that 664 units of obligation, what we have in place, and we've already are taking credit for, are portions of Baldwin Oaks and Brookside, which are called prior cycle credits. They give us existing credits towards that need. We can only apply 166 because we're capped at the number of senior units that we can apply towards that overall obligation of 664. It can't be more than 25% of that overall amount. We're also applying what's called a prior round regional contribution agreements, and that is something called an RCA program. Some of you may have heard that phrase before. What that is we actually instituted with various projects in the past, in Mazdabrook, for instance. Those developments financed and paid monies towards a trust fund program that sent monies to Newark. And those monies were received by Newark and rehabilitated and built new affordable units in that area. Unfortunately, that program was deemed unconstitutional and not appropriate for municipalities to be sending all their needs to other locations, not actually adding affordable housing to their communities. Parsippany's been very appropriate in their approach to their planning, but that some communities, as you can imagine, would like to send all their need to another location and not address it locally. And so that's why that program was discontinued. We're also looking at applying existing alternative living, which is another phrase for group homes. Group homes are very good projects where whether it's a group home carrier or individuals that reside in the group homes. As was mentioned a moment ago, it's not the individual homes, it's the individual bedrooms in those homes apply as credits. So if a home has 3 or 4 bedrooms, that's 3 or 4 credits out of one home. So that's why they're very good programs. Parsippany has been very active in sending and contributing money towards these programs so that we can realize group homes. And that helps to further the efforts of the state, where the state is trying to not institutionalize people with special needs in large facilities. Instead, integrate them in the community. And so this is just one of those programs that shows how those residents or those people are integrated into the community. And they're very successful programs. We also have built inclusionary developments that either, whether it's through a use variance process or zoning, we're able to apply credits. So with that, in our prior round, we're applying 664 credits. So just so you know, some of their existing credits that we have in the community have to go towards what's called a prior round obligation, and they can't be used towards the third round obligation. Although we have some extra, and we are applying some extra towards the third round. And what you'll see here is the general plan that we're looking for to put together for this 850 to 1,000 units of RDP. Some of it involves prior surplus credits, as I mentioned a moment ago, as they're applicable to the actual development. Also, market to affordable programs was mentioned a minute ago, where we can look to convert an existing market unit to an affordable unit by subsidizing, whether it's through the trust fund monies that we receive from certain developments and or existing trust fund monies that we can then be part of the plan. We like this program because it takes existing residential units and brings them down to affordable. We're not adding new units to the community. So you can see how that benefits a municipality. Unfortunately, you can't address all your need with that. It would be much more of an aggressive plan to try to do that, if you can imagine. So there are limits to what we can do there. Accessory apartment mechanisms. It's something we're contemplating. It can only be a very small amount of your need, but that's another program that we're taking a look at, whether it's mother, daughter, or situations such as that. Again, group homes, alternative living is another part or another mechanism in our toolbox. But then again, the larger part will be inclusionary housing proposals and zoning. Unfortunately, with the numbers where they are, we need to apply those inclusionary housing proposals and their zoning to address that need. After you, though, factor out all the RDP, which is 850 to 1,000, there is going to be also another phrase that you may hear about called unmet need. Unmet need is the differential between that 850, let's say, and the 1,300 units. So it could be in the order of 500 to 300 units thereabouts that it's going to be qualified as unmet need. In order to settle with the Fair Share Housing Center and to settle with the courts, they want to make sure you have appropriate mechanisms to try to capture that need and address that unmet need. And the way we do that is through overlay zones and other mechanisms. What I mean by overlay zones is that we may look at certain areas of the community and recommend that if a developer and or an area wishes to revitalize or redevelop their property, and it involves more than 5 units, one of those 5 has to be affordable units in that development. And that's a way of capturing this unmet need. So they want to make sure you have that plan in place. In addition to that, they would also, in many of the settlement agreements that we've been involved in as a planning firm, require is something called a municipal-wide ordinance, where if the zoning board, if the council in the future, for some unforeseen reason, or there's another redevelopment plan that's considered in the future, that adds additional multifamily units that's more than 5 or more units, one of them has to be affordable. And that's only our own due diligence anyway. We want to capture those units as we go forward, if in fact it makes sense for some reason in the future. Not that we're trying to encourage that, that just captures it, just in case, so that the zoning and the planning board both understand that they have to incorporate that if there was to be an approval for a variance, let's say, in an application. So that gives you an understanding of unmet need. As I mentioned earlier, there is actually where we are right now, and this was the latest 2017 computations for our region, Parsippany's region. What qualifies as moderate? What qualifies as low or very low income? And these are the numbers of the incomes that would qualify. So for instance, a two-person household, the maximum they could make for a moderate income would be about $60,000. For very low is down as $22,000. For a four-person family, you would have a maximum of $75,000 and a minimum of $28,000, or about $29,000. So that gives you an idea of the range of incomes that are would meet those specific criteria levels. And as you can imagine, there are areas or people within the community or people within service industries that would meet these criteria. And the idea there is to try to incorporate affordable housing within the community so you're balancing the needs of the community. As many of us read about in the papers, we're all trying to avoid excessive commuting costs and travel. It adds to pollution, it adds to additional traffic, things of that nature. So it's better to incorporate affordable housing in a community to avoid those regional impacts to the overall state. And so with that, that summarizes our presentation, and we can open up for any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any council members have any
Yes, I do.
questions?
Ed, you mentioned the taking of existing units. How do we go about locating those units? How do we talk to not developers, do we talk to
Landlords?
the landlords and so forth, that they would be willing?
Yes. In fact, that's in fact one of the mechanisms that we put in place and started to work on. As Leslie mentioned a moment ago, we have hired, the township has hired community grants. See, I always forget the abbreviation, I apologize. But it's a entity that looks at the community, identifies specific apartments that might be within the range of subsidies that we can offer to bring those rents down to an affordable level. And what we're looking to do is establish this program, and what it would do is to allow for a period of 10 years?
Mr. Gottesman has already started that process and has actually come up with a calculation of how much particular units would need to bring them down to affordable, and he has reached out to people. So he's in that process right now.
Reached out to landlords?
Yes, he's in the process of identifying, finding out what the market rent is and how much they would need to bring the unit down. So we've kind of put some numbers together, so when the spending plan is put together, we will allocate X number of dollars to go towards that program to bring down X number of units.
Would that have to be an entire enclosure, like 10-unit apartment or 20-unit apartment, or have to be the whole thing, or
It could be
or could
any
we do
number.
a piecemeal?
Yes, it could be any number of units.
Could we have that widow that I was talking about before? One apartment and let her live there and subsidize her rent then?
Yes, she's income qualified. And asset-
Sounds like
Well,
she was.
she was evicted because she couldn't pay the rent.
I appreciate that. And that's probably something that we could take a look at. Again, it's on a first come, first served basis, so be careful that we can't specifically find existing residents that we want to move into that location. So there has to be a list of people that are entered.
She would have to be on the list before.
Well, I know what we did in Edison. We
uh,
had a similar situation where someone actually came to court as an interested party during the hearing and said, I need affordable housing. So the judge asked the developer who was there, who has market units, can you work with her and, you know, the township maybe subsidize some money to bring her unit down. So there's some potential
So there is some flexibility.
there.
Go ahead. No. When would this list be comprised? Is it when we have our numbers, or the builders are starting to build, or the apartment owners are starting to convert? When are we going to have these lists, or when will these residents or people desiring low income be able to apply?
That is part of what Mr. Gottesman would be putting together. There's a manual that would be part of our presentation to the court with timeframes for implementing the program. There'll be forms set up for people to fill out. They would check the income level to confirm that they meet the level. So there's a process that he's been doing for many, many years that he would be implementing here in the township. So once we come up with the plan and we say X number for market unit for this program, he'll be off and running to start the program and implementing it.
Okay.
Do we have a contract with this Gottesman now?
Yes.
We do. So then we could call him and ask him questions? Or refer a person to him to see if there's something they can do?
Right, but he's not administering your program yet for affordable units.
So we need a separate contract for that?
No, where you need actual units to be on the books for us to then
Okay.
We haven't
provide for
implemented the
that.
program yet.
You already have Brookside and Baldwin Oaks,
Right.
so they are
But they're
available.
private.
But as you know, their list is also
Yeah, there's
currently
only-
populated
yeah.
with many people.
There's only one way
So-
there's a vacancy in
Yeah,
those.
unfortunately. So, but yet, that's the sort of list that we will be starting as we know we have certain units. But yet, that's the program we can get going right from the get-go, is because we have trust fund monies already in place, we can start to implement that market to affordable program right away.
And just to oversimplify for a rhetorical argument, not only is this obligation not going anywhere, but we're going to be faced with a new calculation in another 8 years.
Correct.
More like
This obligation
7.
only goes to
7, yeah.
2025, so we are already in the time period, and a lot of that hasn't been done, it hasn't been caused by the township. It's been through the courts and trying to determine what your obligation is. So you already have, though, 250 settlements in place, and every judge at this point is pushing very aggressively to have these cases resolved, because we're now going into 2019, and you'll be starting
Right,
in
so
another
six-
couple of
really 6
years
years.
for
It's really
2026.
Okay.
You said we have 500 acres of land available for
5,200.
calculations?
No, once you look at the overall vacant land, you factor out all the environmental restrictions.
Exactly.
As well as properties that are not appropriate because they're open space controlled.
After you do that,
Right.
what's the total acreage we
I
have?
think we were at 150 acres.
150 acres,
Yes.
okay.
152.
So now by the year
152.
2020, by the year 2025, if those 152 acres are spoken for,
You can reassess.
Then
your-
what?
You can reassess your vacant land adjustment and see what your vacant capacity is for the community.
okay.
You're allowed to.
Because we're running out of land.
You're allowed, under the current rules, you're allowed to reevaluate your vacant land every cycle that you go through and prepare your housing element and fair share plan.
And
Okay.
is this like an eminent domain opportunity where if someone owned a farm or a nursery and the judge said there's a perfectly good nursery right there, put apartments on it, if it was privately held, how would that transpire?
All the municipality has to do is actually zone for it. You don't have to compel a developer to build it. Your obligation is to zone.
Understood.
Just to provide the opportunity for it
Right.
to happen.
Unless you're doing 100% affordable, which was mentioned as one of the mechanisms before. And that's where that gets a little more complicated. You have to engage a developer, go through an RFP process, things of that nature in order to establish the 100% development,
Okay.
which other communities have done successfully, and it might be a mechanism.
Ed, we're hearing 850 to 1,000.
Mhm.
And then you mentioned 666 units, I believe.
Mhm.
Do you feel that your opinion, I'm not saying this is going to be gospel, do you feel that those numbers can come down, the 850?
It's
To
really,
1,000?
it's probably inappropriate for me to say at this time.
Okay.
Because we're
Okay.
still involved in litigation.
Okay.
And if we
But-
want to discuss that, we should probably do that in closed session.
And keep
Let
in
me-
mind, too, that the 850 is a number that's going to be reduced by the credits that Ed mentioned. So the actual number of units that will need to be produced will not be the 850. It'll be some number lower than that after all the credits that Ed mentioned are applied.
Okay, and then what percentage do we need to build to get to 850?
That's what I'll have to get back to you on.
Oh,
Because it
okay.
involves that whole process, and it's something that you will know about
But
once we
but
get
through-
involved in
through
the
you,
process.
but
And
through you,
remember that-
council, through you, Council President, Ed, in a hypothetical situation, not
Mhm.
talking
Thank
about
you.
our specific situation.
Right.
And I think this is hugely important for public clarification. we talk about these numbers of somewhere between 850 and 1,000. That's our affordable obligation. Prospective builders are going to look to build only a percentage of their development as low income. Could you just expand on that so everyone walks out of here with a true number rather than a number of just
More high
affordable
income
units?
for everyone, low
Use the
income.
1,000 number.
Yeah,
Use the 1,000 number.
Exactly. You saw the math before where Leslie had pointed out that you take 5 times the affordable number of units. And the reason why it's 5 times is that usually it's a 20% set aside of the development is affordable. So that's why it's 5 times the number. But what we wanted to point out is that we do have some existing credits that we're trying to draw down the 850, if it's 850, down lower. So that's why, keep in mind that there is some mechanism still we're looking to apply. But don't get me wrong, there still will be a substantial need for us to address. So I just wanted to be clear on that. You had mentioned also 664.
Oh.
I had shown that number as what's called prior round need.
That was the, okay.
That's not part of the 850.
No, that's
That's a
different.
totally separate number. And I wanted that to be clear as well.
Okay.
I think council needs to keep in mind too that in all actuality, a majority of your units to make your number will be part of an inclusionary project. So you will be faced with and you will be presented with the various proposals that have been proposed, and you will need to make that determination. Out of those proposals that have been presented, which one of those proposals will go into the plan to meet your number?
Okay.
And that's going to be an intensive work effort between now and February 1st amongst the members of the governing body and the administration.
Thank you very much.
Now,
Thank you
this
very
is
much.
this is a plan that we have to put together by February. I mean, you know, and this building isn't obviously going to occur.
No.
So we're talking years out for the building.
Yes.
And then 2025, we begin this plan again, and that's my
But
understanding.
I think what's important to recognize is that once the plan is submitted to the Superior Court, and if it is signed off upon by the Superior Court judge and the special master, it will come back to the township for consideration for zoning changes to be in compliance with the plan.
That's right.
So that's the action that will need to be taken by this body. Any zone changes to support the ingredients, so to speak, of what we put in this plan.
But for February, you're talking about putting together this plan and saying, this is where we're gonna build, and we're gonna build here, so picking out different spots where they'll
Yes.
either build or do some.
Your plan will have to identify those projects that you will be using to satisfy your number. So you have to make that decision, what projects are gonna meet your number.
And where you're comfortable with zoning for these prospective developments.
I mean, but what's the, and then I guess that's where you'll tell us where the opportunities are, to
That's
do
correct.
that.
Any other questions?
No, thank you very
good.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very informative. Thank you.
You know, just a side remark, if I may. The courts don't really care about how many children that puts into our school district.
Nope, they
They could care less.
You're correct.
Do they care about infrastructure or anything like that, water resources?
Well, they assume that you will make as part of your agreement with the developer that they take care of the infrastructure issues. And those ABULs that I mentioned earlier, the sites that are selected have to meet all of those ABULs, developable and approvable, et cetera.
And meet standards?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
through you, Council President, the public and the members of the council should be aware that we met with the committee of the Board of Education last week with the team who made the presentation to you this evening. The Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Sargent, was also present. I know there's one of the board members is in the audience tonight. We went through a very similar presentation to what you experienced tonight with the committee of the board and the superintendent, and subsequently in a closed session, a similar presentation was made to the planning board last Thursday evening. So the reason we're doing this, obviously, right on the holidays coming up, is that there is a huge urgency for us to be able to put this together in the month of January, and that's why the planning board and the school board were both briefed in addition to the council this evening.
Thank you.
Actually, I think we have quite a few members of the Board of Ed here.
I count at least
I see at
three.
least 4.
Yeah, but only 2 of them were at that meeting last
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, township offices, committees, reports, anything?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Okay. Bids taken, November 15th, 2018, transportation and disposal of sewage sludge cake. November 20th, invitation for bids from New Jersey Board of Public Utilities, licensed electric power suppliers for electric generation services. To be taken, December 20th, 2018, proposals for rental of golf carts. January 10th, 2019, SCADA system improvements, quotations, proposals, qualifications, none. This time I entertain a motion to open up the public hearing.
Motion.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Floor is open to the public to speak on any matter.
Okay, if you do come up, please state your name and address. You'll be given 5 minutes.
Maybe we could put this mic back over there.
Colette has one. He's ahead of us.
Hello?
We're not doing tandem, it's just doing
Give me
Good evening, members of the Town Council and Mr. Mayor. My name is Joe Sestaro, and I reside at 10 Trouville Drive. I'm also a member of the Board of Education, although this evening I'm speaking only for myself and not for the Board of Ed. I'd like to know from the council, what is your understanding of the 1515 Route 10's pilot payment, specifically in relation to what portion of that payment's revenue will be shared with the Board of Education? Excuse me. This type of fiscal arrangement between the township and Board of Education is novel, so it's my intent this evening to hear a statement on the town council's desired outcome for an equitable distribution of that pilot between the township and the Board of Education. The Board of Education costs will go up because of this new development. Incremental costs include but are not limited to busing, potential for net new teachers, depending on the student distribution, the potential for any number of out-of-district placements of special needs students, etc. And although maybe not immediately, eventually we will reach an inflection point where we will need to build more classroom space as we fulfill our COA obligations. Quite simply, we don't know yet what 1515s or any other yet to be determined developments will have to the Board of Education's budget. I would also like to know what involvement did the township have with the Board of Ed during this process of developing this pilot. My reason for asking is that one of the algorithms used for the pilot includes an $11,000 per student figure. The actual number is about $16,000 per student based upon the latest data we have. In review, here are my questions. What portion of the pilot will be shared with the Board of Ed? And if that arrangement is yet to be determined, then what is your desired outcome? And what specific involvement did the Board of Ed have with the township to develop this pilot? Thank you very much.
So I can probably answer some of those questions. There's a statutory formula that provides that the pilot payment is shared between the municipality and the county. 95% of that payment goes to the municipality, 5% goes to the county. The project, any project that is entered into an abatement agreement continues to pay land tax. A portion of that land tax is shared with the school district as well as the county and the fire district. The law doesn't provide for any direct involvement of the school district in the formulation of a pilot. That relationship is between the municipality and the redeveloper. Now, whether mayor and council wishes to entertain whether it wants to enter into a separate agreement with the Board of Education to potentially share some of their pilot revenue is a it's an issue that I can't address. That needs to be directed to elected officials. In terms of the pilot arrangement being novel, this is not novel. Pilots are done throughout the state. They've been used in New Jersey now for well over 30 years. There were recent pilot agreements in Wharton, Boonton, Morristown. So it's the idea of having a pilot to support a redevelopment project is not a novel occurrence in New Jersey.
Thank you.
Good evening, Town Council, Mr. Mayor. My name is Tim Berrios, 24 Farmstead Drive. And on full disclosure, I am also a member of the Parsippany Troy Hills Board of Education, although I stand before you tonight as a taxpayer and speaking for myself and myself only. One of the things that got mentioned during the presentation, and I've attended a number of council meetings where this is always brought up, that 65% of the tax dollars that the residents send in go to the Board of Education. And that is probably very much the case. What is never ever mentioned, and I want to make sure everybody's clear on this, is that for every dollar that gets sent in for taxes, in which 65 cents goes to the Board of Education, that goes to Trenton. Parsippany does not get 65 cents back from Trenton. I think in 2018 budget year, Parsippany was short on the formula by $2.3 million, and it might be 2.6, but I believe it was 2.3. So I just want to make sure that's clear, that you're not sending out 65 cents and getting back 65 cents. That is not the case. As relates to the new development, I won't repeat a lot of what my neighbor, Mr. Sestaro, said, but I do like the model here. But there is one problem with it. There's no school. Okay? We keep building, and we're doing all these wonderful things, and yet what is never in any of these plans is a school, a firehouse, a police station. And I remember way back in the days of the Mazda book, when there was being rebuilt or being built. And one of the outcomes of that, although will never be admitted, was a whole redistricting of the Parsippany school system, for which my family was directly impacted as we just moved into Parsippany Troy Hills. So there is a cost, and one of the costs that will be is that potentially that as the environment changes, as more of these type of developments are built, there will need to be adjustments made at the school system. As was mentioned, teachers, classrooms, maybe moving students around to fulfill the needs. As was presented in the planning here, there's not a lot of space available in Parsippany right now to just throw up another school. Nor can I state, at least I've heard the rumor, that there's also not a lot of money to put up a school in the town. So my challenge to the council as a taxpayer is, I understand the short-term issue that we're looking at here. I don't necessarily understand how this beautiful structure resolves all that. But what I do hear and what I do see is that, at some point in time, whether it gets, it's the old saying about pay me now, pay me later, whether it gets paid up front here or it gets paid at the back end by the taxpayers through the Board of Education, there's going to be a check to write for some of this. And I think it needs to be clear. And once again, let me state for the record, and anybody who doesn't believe me, please come to a Board of Ed meeting, ask the question, we'll give you the data. 65 cents of your tax dollar goes to the Board of Ed, and that goes to Trenton. It does not come back to Parsippany.
Tim, one minute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard Rosenthal, 3 Cambridge Road. Much of what I said appeared in thanks to Frank Cahill's Parsippany Focus, but I want to develop the point what I'm talking about. This is a beautiful property. I would have no objection to it if it was done under any other circumstance. What I object to very strenuously, that this is an area in need of development. I live in this area, so let me tell you what the area is. I'm going to give you a verbal picture. We are standing in front of this property. To the left is the Hilton, beautiful hotel. It is 7/10 of a mile to get onto 287, a major intersection. Let's go back up Route 10. Adjacent to this property is the main headquarters for Delta Dental. Next building, 1790, is rented with the IRS. Next building, Weichert. Next property over is Kohl's, a major supermarket. I'm sorry, Stop and Shop. Major supermarket, not a small one. Across the road is Kohl's, which is now in the process of redeveloping that area, putting up a new piece of property for Chipotle. Going up as far as 53, let's come back on 53. Tabor Inn, Granada. Continuing down is the Gateway Project. Continuing down, Barnes & Noble, Kinko's, or what is it, Federal Express now. And across the road from this piece of property is a major office complex. I was through it again today just to check what was in there. Think about the world headquarters you have in there. GAF, I saw NJM, I think there's so many companies in there. How about 30, 40, 50 buildings? This in any other area would be a major complex. And it is in Parsippany, but I think it's a marvelous project. This is across the road. So you have taken this piece of property and now have said this is an area in need of development. This isn't Camden. This isn't Newark. This is a beautiful piece of property on a highly commercial road, Route 10. Let's take the next step back here. What you are doing is, if you were calling this piece of property an area in need, okay? Think of all the other properties, what you have. And not only have you lowered the bar, we used to call it spot zoning. That's what you've done here. You call it, this is spot zoning. You call it what you want, it is spot zoning. You have not only lowered the bar, you've taken the bar away. If I was a realtor and you passed this property based upon this, that this is an area in need of redevelopment, in my area alone, I'm going to go along, let's say 202, 1500 is 1200, that's empty right now. I would say that's an area in need of redevelopment. I'm a realtor. And because you have set the standard so low, I'm going to take you to court. And that's where the attorney's fees come in. We lived in a horror of years of very high attorney's fees. Then what I would do, I would look at Tabor Lake. And I would say, and I would go to the owner of this property, give him a nice price for it. I would open up Manor Lane, I would open up Pigeon Hill, and I would say, this is an area in need of development. How many areas are you going to go into town and somebody say, this is an area in need of development? And then you get, and I love the letter you call it a pilot. So you keep saying pilot, pilot, pilot. It's payment in lieu of taxes. And if you didn't use the acronym and you kept saying payment in lieu of taxes, it would make much more sense. What you're doing, you're opening the floodgates to every piece of property, because you are now saying, and I would develop and I would go to court to argue with you that this is a property in need of development, and watch our taxes. This is the money we're going to pay because of this tax giveaway. We are paying for it. I'm finished.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lott, can you clarify who says this was an area in need of redevelopment?
Okay, so that determination was made under prior administration. That's a shared responsibility between the governing body, who initially authorizes a study to be conducted. That study is conducted along with a public hearing at the planning board, and then a recommendation is made from the planning board to the governing body, and ultimately the governing body made the determination that the property was in need of redevelopment, which is a legal recognition that the conventional zoning that was existing for the area was unlikely to produce a project that would be permitted under the zoning code.
So that means that they wouldn't, it's not likely that an office would go in there again?
That's correct.
An office building or a
Yes.
corporate?
And through you, Council President, to Councilwoman Peterson, that process began here in Parsippany on this particular property in 2015. Mr. Maiden was kind enough to share with me all the council and planning board action taken on this particular property. It was subsequently approved for redevelopment in 2016, and then an ordinance was unanimously passed by the last year's council in August of 2017, declaring it a redevelopment site.
Thank you.
Nicholas Homiak, Lake Hiawatha. I come here specifically to voice my pro that Parsippany should have been and should still get into the Highlands conformance, because you still, even COA, you can't ignore environmental sustainability. You can't. You have water management plans. We need a new master plan. It's long overdue. Our master plans have been silly putty in the hands of developers, and it could still happen again with these housing threats. But what makes Parsippany think they can do a better job than the experts in the regional management plan that they can provide for us? We're 100% in the planning zone. There's nothing to lose. And in fact, I think we have lost already greatly in the past by listening to bad advice from the last administration. And that shouldn't continue. It's the example right here, 1515 Route 10. Do we really need more retail in Parsippany? No, but we do need fair share housing. So they want a 20% set aside. 20% set aside. And a pilot deal where you can get up to 100% or certainly more than 20. So the 20% with the pilot deal, with the housing obligations or maybe even threats that we may face if we don't start protecting ourselves with expert planners, is just not worth it, in my opinion. And how about all these other overdeveloped office spaces and everything that are littering Parsippany for the speculation developments that don't work out? And don't think that this one will necessarily work out. Everybody's calling this beautiful. When I look at it, I see it as a high degree of abstraction that borders on fantasy. I don't see, it's, you know, it's the 1,000-year Reich or something here for Parsippany. It's just, it's too much of a fantasy. And it's not meeting our needs. 20% set aside. Is that their ploy to get us to give them the pilot deal? I say no. No. But we have to stop mixing the oranges with apples. The Highlands is about water sustainability, storm water, and it's about protecting our environmentally sensitive resources that we have. Resources that work for us already through nature. Nature doesn't ask anything, it gives. A developer comes in, erases the landscape like Waterview over there, it's not working for us anymore. That's another potential housing site in 2026 or when the next is coming up, because if their little fantasy world doesn't work out, it's another perfect setup for more affordable housing. And it could have been saved by our own master plan if we determine it, but we don't. And we can if we latch on to the Highlands Regional Management Plan, to the experts, and I would say we need them now more than ever. And this affordable housing thing is a separate issue, but they can help us, if anybody can, to put this in the right place where it belongs, not a developer, because this is a free-for-all for them. They're after their own interests, not ours, and we've seen that already here in Parsippany, and it's time it ended. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Bob Venezzi. I live at 102 Brooklawn Drive. I'm going to speak about the 1515 project when the ordinance comes up. But I was wondering, I had some questions when they were making the presentations about the, all the affordable housing and co and that business. Is it possible for me to ask them these questions
Yeah, go ahead.
at this point?
Right. Good.
Okay. One question I had is, can Parsippany add money to the housing trust fund, or does that money have to come from developers?
Well, go ahead and ask all your questions, and I'll answer them all.
Okay. We know that the court can force us to build affordable units when there's construction going up. Can the court also force us to accept a pilot, even if the terms in that pilot are unfavorable? And the next thing I'd like to know is, has anybody ever challenged this Fair Share Housing Corporation on their methodology? Because I looked at it, and they're assuming in this for the from 2016 to 2025, this segment that we're in, they're assuming the growth rate in New Jersey is going to be over 9%. That's crazy. This state isn't growing. If they took a more reasonable growth rate, like 4%, everybody's number in the whole state would be cut in half. And has anybody ever challenged that? And the next thing is, there are 30% population-wise in the state of New Jersey is exempt from affordable housing rules. Is that? I want to make sure that that's correct. And as I understand it, those towns have affordable housing needs, but since they're exempt, that 30% gets spread over all the other towns that are not exempt. So towns like Parsippany and all the other towns that have quotas, they're necessarily 30% higher because of all these exemptions. And I just want to point that out, and why are they exempt? I mean, you got towns like Jersey City's exempt. They built they built tens of thousands of apartments in the last few years, and none of them had to be affordable. Same thing with Hoboken. Same thing with Montclair. Same thing with 90% of Essex County. They don't have any. We have to absorb them because we're in the same district or region. Excuse me, region is the proper term. We're in the same region as Essex County. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I hope I will remember all of the questions. The first one dealt with the development, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The money comes from a development fee, and that's by statute. Second one, the court does not get involved with pilots. That's a municipal issue. Third question, whether or not the methodology has been challenged in the court. Yes. As I had mentioned during the presentation, the reason why the court case or the court process took so long from when the case initially started in 2015 to date was because of the methodology. There was competing interest of what the methodology should be. In Mercer County, before Judge Jacobson, that was the case where the methodology was tested. You had Fair Share Housing, the developers, and the municipality, West Windsor and Princeton on the other side, all the different experts, the court masters involved, to determine what the methodology should be. These are experts in the field. They spent 40 days providing testimony, very detailed testimony to the court. The court spent many months, Judge Jacobson, reading through and determining, in her view, what the methodology should be, and she issued a 200-page decision going through that methodology. That has not been challenged by any municipality because of the extent of the time and effort in that case. And I think the numbers came, for the most part, to be deemed reasonable. And as I mentioned, it's a regional number. So it does look at a region, not a specific municipality. The fourth comment you made was the exemption from COA. You are correct. There are certain municipalities, cities in the state that are exempt from COA, and their numbers are spread. That's, again, by law. To change that, the law would have to be changed. And I think the rationale for that was because those cities in particular were deemed to already have a large number of affordable housing. Now, what's happened in many of those towns, you mentioned Jersey City, they have on their own decided to, for any development that is being built, to require the developer to have affordable housing. So you find many of those municipalities that are exempt imposing a requirement on their own for the developers coming in. And again, for that to change, you need to contact your legislators.
The only thing I would add would be that I'm not aware of any court ever ordering a municipality to provide for a payment, but there's always that first case of impression where a court could do that.
What a court might do also is that what you may have a situation, you may have a developer who feels that the township is not doing everything to achieve a realistic plan, and go into court and try to argue to the judge that I have a project that can be used and can be used to help the municipality meet its obligation, and the municipality is not doing everything it can to assist me in my efforts. Now, that type of lawsuit could possibly prevail. And in that type of situation, you may have the court then rule, yes, municipality, you have to do more to help meet your number. So it always goes back to the number. If you can't meet your number and you have a project that's out there that can meet your number, the court is going to require you to use that project.
Another issue that exempts some towns, there are some towns that have septic systems and wells on each of their properties. Talk about exclusionary zoning, minimum 5-acre housing, okay? I don't know if Harding fits into this, but there are towns like that where they don't have city water and sewer. Therefore, they do not have adequate infrastructure, and they are exempt from Mount Laurel. We have adequate infrastructure, so we're stuck.
And then you also may have, in some cases, developers who will say, I'll put the infrastructure in.
Correct.
So that takes away that argument.
That's expensive. I haven't heard of any contractor doing that.
It's always a possibility.
Oh, I'm aware of one.
All right, thank you.
We'll talk offline.
Good, sir.
Good evening. My name is Elliot Ruga. I'm the Policy and Communications Director of the New Jersey Highlands Coalition. We're located in Boonton. And I have been interpreting, commenting on, and consulting on the Highlands Act, the Highlands Regional Master Plan, and the conformance process with the Highlands for the past 12 years that I've been with the coalition. And I want to comment on a resolution that's before you tonight to rejoin the process of conformance with the Highlands Regional Master Plan. I reviewed the video recording this week of the June 17th, 2014 council meeting when the council passed the resolution to rescind conformance with the Highlands Regional Master Plan. Your municipal attorney at the time, John Inglesino, gave compelling but inaccurate reasons to opt out of conformance, and I would like to bring to your attention those inaccuracies. In order to rectify the failure of the Skyview pump station, the most reasonable option at the time would require a new wastewater management plan. As a conforming community, the Highlands Council would be the agency to work with to develop that WIMP. But in order for the Highlands Council to complete the WIMP, Parsippany would have had to have been much farther along in the conformance process, introducing an unnecessary and unacceptable delay. That statement is misleading. Yes, in order for the Highlands Council to work with Parsippany to develop its WIMP, there's a certain milestone of conformance which would have had to have been reached. Specifically, Parsippany's petition to conform with the Highlands Regional Master Plan would have had to have been approved by the Highlands Council. Yet, well before the date of June 17th, 2014, Parsippany had an administratively complete petition filed with the council waiting for approval. Given the risk of health and safety to the community because of the failed pump station, approval could have been fast-tracked, or the Highlands Council would have begun development of the WIMP concurrent with any consultation necessary for approval of your petition. So the suggestion that by remaining in conformance would provide a significant delay in rectifying the situation caused by the failure of the Skyview pump station was not true. And the costs of a development of a WIMP by the, for a conforming municipality is covered by the Highlands Council. So by going instead with the county as you did, if Parsippany had to cover those costs, not only were you misled, but it came at a cost to Parsippany residents that was unnecessary. I don't mean to disparage Morris County and their planning department, they are aces. Mr. Inglesino went on to say that the Edwards Road and Morris Corporate 5 redevelopment projects would be jeopardized by continued conformance. Mr. Inglesino gave no details, and he wasn't questioned about how those redevelopment projects would be jeopardized. But at face value, this statement is contrary to fundamental principles of the Highlands Act and the Regional Master Plan. In the Highlands Land Use Capability Zone map, Parsippany lies almost entirely in the existing community zone, where redevelopment is encouraged. The only conceivable reasons these properties could have been jeopardized is if they posed a risk to increased flooding, or a high-value upland forest, or other valuable environmental resource that provides ecological services to this community would have been at risk.
Sir, 1 minute.
Thank you. I should also point out that a Highlands conforming municipality, the Highlands Council would provide expert redevelopment planning at no cost to the community. So it comes down to a question: is it in Parsippany's best interest to return to conformance? As an entirely voluntary program, as evidenced by how easy it was to opt out and how welcome you are to rejoin the process, you're not signing in blood. You will have access to some of the best planning experts in all the relevant specialty areas of municipal planning to augment your planning staff and engineering staff. And these services come to you at no cost. It's a no-brainer. But don't take it from me. I'm an advocate for the Highlands Act. Take it from a colleague of yours, Wharton Mayor Bill Chegwin. In fact, Mayor Chegwin has extended an invitation to any of you to speak to him how Highlands conformance has more than any other state agency helped Wharton plan for a future it wants. So it would be, I believe, in Parsippany's best interest to join conformance again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kandalski, 21 Winfield Drive. Good evening. I would like to talk about Highlands conformance as well, although I would like to make a quick suggestion on 1515 is that in this deal, if you can get them to increase the number of low-cost units, now's the time to do it. But getting back to Highlands conformance, you saw a lot of information a couple of weeks ago when presentations were made here, and you've heard more information kind of in general about all the different programs that are available to you and the benefits to Parsippany. I would like to talk very, very quickly about several towns and the benefits that they've received from being in conformance. So the first is Oxford Township in Warren County. They applied for Highland Center designation in 2011. The center includes an abandoned manufacturing site in need of remediation. The owner of the site had not paid taxes in several years. The municipality was considering acquiring the property to curtail the losses, but was concerned about liabilities. The Highlands Council got involved. The staff was able to arrange a meeting with the appropriate people and professionals at NJDEP. The township was assured that they would have no liability. They were able to take possession of the abandoned property. A remediation plan was developed for the property. The township was able to secure funding through the Hazardous Discharge Site Remediation Fund to clean the site and prepare it for development. In Califon, in 2016, the New Jersey Society of Municipal Engineers awarded first-place honors to a stormwater management program in Califon that was conceived and funded in part through a Highlands Council Plan conformance grant. The project provided improvements to conveyance systems of ditches, open channels, and pipes and culverts, as well as the construction of infiltration and recharge trenches in a flood-prone area of the borough located at the bottom of a steep slope. The frequent flooding, which had resulted in water quality degradation downstream, has been reduced through these efforts. In Phillipsburg, the Highlands Council funding enabled the town to prepare the redevelopment plan for the former Ingersoll Rand site. Highlands Council staff supported the development of initial redevelopment plan, and when that was changed, they were able to fund a revised plan. The site is now being developed with several million square feet of flexible warehouse distribution space, along with substantial green infrastructure. So there are 3 towns that have been very, very successful, have saved money, and have noticeably improved their environment by partnering with the Highlands Council. I would like to also mention 2 programs, the Water Use and Conservation Management Planning. The Highlands Water Use and Conservation Management Plan provides a method for identifying the quantity of water available quantity of available water resources in the Highlands region, which is then used to identify areas where water resources are or are not sufficient to support existing human and ecological uses. Where sufficient water availability exists, the method fairly allocates available water resource among future human uses. Where the water resources have been stressed, additional planning and mitigation is necessary. So here we have the situation in Parsippany, where, as we know, we're in a water deficit. And where multiple townships rely on the same aquifer, the Highlands Council could provide invaluable regional planning encompassing all the affected towns and minimizing disagreements. So Parsippany would not have to go alone and work with other towns that are drawing upon the same aquifer and hope that everybody's in agreement with a mitigation plan. The Highlands Council would facilitate that. That alone, I think, is one of the most important reasons for conforming.
Ken, 1 minute.
The other is lake management. The Highlands Council has fully funded lake management plans for Lake Apacon, Greenwood Lake, and Wharton Borough. These plans meet the EPA's Watershed Implementation Plan standards and identify water quality issues with the lakes. The preparation of these plans will allow the Lake Commission to apply to the NJDEP for capital funds for the implementation of identified strategies. So when we have problems with lakes, with Parsippany and other lakes, we don't have to go alone. We turn to the Highlands Council. They will help us with plans, and they will help us with funding, and they will link us to the NJDEP experts and help us apply for grant money. As Elliot said, as Nick said, you know, it's a win-win. How could you not buy into this program? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Zachary Cole. I'm here on behalf of the Highlands Coalition. I know that you were all at the presentation on conformance last week, and also I'm aware that the Highlands Council staff are here also, so I'll be brief. I'm here to speak about the conformance issue, by the way. Should have started with that. So there is an old adage in the environmental field to think global but act local. This phrase is used frequently. However, it perfectly sums up the course of action for us to achieve a prosperous and sustainable future here in northern New Jersey. In this context, global is northern New Jersey and the 6.2 million people who depend on water stored in the highlands, and the local is you guys, it's Parsippany, it's the residents of these combined towns, which, given it is the largest town by population in the highlands, actually makes it a key player in the region. For the Highlands Water Protection and Planning Act to really be effective in protecting the water resources, it is necessary for Highlands towns to align their development ordinances with the objectives of the regional master plan, thus enabling manageable growth at the municipal level and ensuring sustainable growth also in the wider region. I recognize that every town in the Highlands has its own distinct character, and naturally local issues need to be addressed. However, all 88 municipalities have one thing in common. That's a collective responsibility to steward the water and other natural resources in the Highlands and guarantee their quality long into the future. The Highlands Council staff are some of the best planners in New Jersey with state-of-the-art technology at your disposal. Parsippany Troy Hills could use these facilities to conduct environmental and resource capacity inventories, which will inform your planning and integrate sustainability into your long-term development. Additionally, there are funds available through a variety of grants to conduct this research and actually implement the plans that you come up with. So finally, I respectfully urge each of you to support rejoining the Conformance Initiative through the Highlands Council. To go back to that notion of thinking global and acting local, conformance has both local and global benefits. It's a strategy for towns to take control of their development that is part of a larger regional plan that protects the natural resources, supports sustainable economic growth, and that's a huge action and one that the council and its residents could be proud of. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anita Shotwell, a managing trustee of Wildlife Preserves, which owns more than 1,500 acres in Troy and makes us the largest private landowner in the township. We want to urge the township to re-implement Highlands Conformance. There's so many potential benefits with Highlands Conformance, not the least of which is assistance with the stormwater management plan. As it stands, there are a number of areas such as Beverwick and Troy Meadows Road, where untreated stormwater is funneled into Troy Meadows, full of road salt, fertilizer, and roadside trash. Aside from the impact on biodiversity and health of Troy Meadows, which is our focus, the direction and retention of stormwater is an important issue for everyone who lives, works in, or drives through Troy, which is a lot of people. The natural function of the wetland areas is to help absorb and purify water and prevent flooding in areas all over the township. The more that function continues to be compromised, the more problems we're going to encounter in township roadways, residences, and businesses. 4 years ago, Mr. Inglesino told us that the township could opt back into Highlands Conformance at any time. Since open space in Parsippany is disappearing at an alarming rate, and we have no mechanism to create new large-scale open space, I would say the time is now to re-implement Highlands Conformance. And one PS with these new constructions, something to consider, just a small touch. If you were to require native vegetation to be planted as part of the vegetation plan when it gets to the planning board, or at the very least, non-invasive plants, a little bit might go a long way. Thank you.
Thank you.
take that off, I guess. Okay. Good evening. I'm very tired, so excuse me. My name is Laura McCluskey. I am a resident here at 136 Lakeshore Drive in Lake Hiawatha, and I'm also the chair of the Environmental Advisory Committee. And I'd like to speak to you very briefly about the Highlands conformance. We've been discussing it as a committee, of course. So we're beginning to rewrite our master plan. The Highlands Council is a treasure trove of experts willing to assist with technical advice, mapping, and sustainable planning. We are one of the most densely populated towns in the Highland region, and it is the belief of the Environmental Committee that we have an obligation to join the council and work with our neighbors. Now it's time to align our master plan with the master plan of the Highlands Regional Master Plan. Now is the time to be a team player with other municipalities who are managing their land and water and resources with their future generations in mind. We need to keep our future generations in mind as well as theirs. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. This confirmation would keep allowing Parsippany to make intelligent, long-term, and sustainable decisions in every aspect of our town, with guidance and assurance that we are making the right decisions, because we'll have some backing and some information from other people outside of our municipality. And we won't look back in retrospect wishing we had done things differently. I'll leave you with the word sustainable development. This is the process of planning not for today and not even for tomorrow, but for generations from now. Our land and our water and our air are precious commodities. They are our gold. And gold mining towns, some are still thriving today and others have dried up as ghost towns. The difference was how those towns' futures were planned. So let's keep Parsippany thriving for generations to come, and they will look back and they will thank us. And that will never be a bad thing. Thank you.
Be careful. You broke it.
Allison Kogan, 4 Faber Road in Parsippany. I am a member of the Board of Ed, but I'm standing before you as a taxpayer. I would like to expand on one thing that mentioned by Mr. DiPiero, was that the courts and the judges will not care about how these developments affect Parsippany and the residents and the services, which is why you council members really have to take care of those other services and take into consideration those other services when you are planning out, you know, the new development and the plan that you're going to put before the judge in February. And with respect to my fellow board members' comment that a pilot was novel in Parsippany, it is not novel in New Jersey. He was not saying that. It is new in Parsippany, and we really would like to make sure that it is done right with input from all interested and affected parties. And I would encourage the council to enter into discussions with the Board of Ed to share this and any future pilot agreements. And Parsippany's future success depends on the council and the township working with the Board of Education with respect to new development as early in those processes as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, see no one else come forward, entertain. Whoop.
Hey, you guys have a quorum here. That's illegal.
No, 5. It's not 5 of us. Good evening, Town Council, Mayor. My name is Susie Golderer. I live at 187 Vale Road, and I am also on the Board of Education, but I am here as a taxpayer. And what I'd like to say is something that has been lacking for many years, and that is
conversations between the town council and the Board of Education in making sure that when plans are made for the town, we are included. And the reason why is because, yes, our budget is bigger than the one for the town. We also do have many students. We have a lot of employees, a lot of expenses that go with it, and we need to make sure that we act as one community. Just because we're two separate entities, we are still vying for the same tax dollars, for the same community, and we have to be very careful. And as previous board members said, it might you say 65% of it is for the Board of Education, and that in fact is not true. Very little comes back to us, and that's another legislative thing where the community should go and reach out to their legislators and make sure that those type of things do change and more money comes back. The township has to understand that any more development creates stress on the school system, because wherever it is that you're developing, those schools that are nearby, okay, some of them don't have any room as it is, so that we have 25 students per classroom. If you have a class of 22 students already, and for whatever grade level, 4 more come in, that means we have to open up another classroom. That means that every school can easily cost another $100,000, $200,000, okay, to our taxpayers. And that means that with the cap that we have for 2%, we would find ourselves having to create a budget that goes over that 2%. And what problem would that create? That means that it goes out to the public. And if the public votes it down, then that's a very big issue for the board. So we need to learn to, we need to develop a relationship in where when, the development might help on one end, but it definitely helps us on another. I was at the master plan meeting, and I was sitting with the economic development, and what was said was that Home Depot is leaving and Staples is leaving, and they're considering more apartments being built over there. I don't even know if our structure in Parsippany infrastructure can handle that. So it is very important that we, the Board of Education, or not we, sorry, I'm not talking for them, but that the township has the Board of Education, at the seat as well, for conversations, so that they can give you input as to what's going on. Just one child, special needs child, that has to go out of district can cost $130,000 a year. Just one. So we have to be very cognizant. It is very important that we think of these developments, we think of through. And we don't just make decisions of, saving something or, bringing money in for one reason when we're going to spend it in another way. And ultimately, it's us, the taxpayers, who get hit with it.
1 minute.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Town Council. I figured I'd bring up something on a different matter in this town. I
What's
love
your name?
Parsippany's Jeffrey Altschul,
And your address, please?
203 Everett Road, Lake Parsippany. Been here, and I've been retired the last few years, and as a retiree, I found you have to find ways to stay busy to enjoy retirement. Library was my first base. Through my wife, she's involved, she's retired now as well. And we now belong to Montville Library, Lake Hiawatha Library, our main library. But above all, We belong to the Kinnelon Library. They have a program that they just hit 25 years of CLL, Continuous Life Learning, which gives so many opportunities for seniors, from hiking to making money, that they've actually put that library in the black. And whereas that library was struggling, having that CLL with groups of all seniors, guys that are retired, women that are retired from education, professors, have courses there on subjects that are just remarkable. This town could use a program like that. There's enough retiree people in this large community that our libraries here could sustain and have the same thing of CLL, a continuing life learning process for this town. And it would make a lot of money because there's a lot of people here that are retired teachers that could enjoy it, professors that I know that would love to teach. Something you guys should look into. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's good. Continuing life learning, CLL.
Okay, see no one else
No,
come forward and entertain
if I
a
may.
motion to close?
That's an interesting proposal. That's an interesting proposal. I'd like to talk to you about that. Thank you. Sorry.
That's okay. Okay, see no one else come forward and entertain a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero.
Yes.
Ms. Grignani.
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy.
Yes.
Ms. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy.
Yes.
Floor is closed.
Council President, if I may respond to some of the comments that were made regarding the Highlands Council, I would like to. I was a no vote based upon the 2014 issue with our Skylands pumping station and the information we received from our township attorney at that time. Mr. Dolsky sent me a video of that council meeting with statements from the Highlands Council correcting certain points in Mr. Inglesino's statements, which I was not aware of. You have to understand, when we're sitting here on the town council, we rely on our experts, our township attorney, our administration, our local experts, our consultants, to give us the best advice available. And we base our decisions based on that information. The school board does the same thing. They rely on their experts and their administration and their superintendent to give them advice. And they vote based on the information that is given to them. So I've gone through a learning process here that maybe the Skylands could have been addressed a little differently. The Skylands pumping station could have been addressed differently. I was not aware of that since 2014, so I've changed my mind and I would support going to the Highlands Council.
Okay, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to take a 5-minute break.
Let's take a 5-minute recess. Given the late hour, we're going to do a 5-minute recess. So hold on, before anybody gets up, we need a motion in a second.
For that.
Motion.
Second? Okay, motion made by Mr. DePiero, second by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero, yes. Ms. Grignani? Yes. Ms. McCarthy, yes. Ms. Peterson, yes. Mr.
Yes.
Carriffy, yes. A 5-minute recess.
Okay, make a motion to reconvene.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion made by
By
Ms. Peterson, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
We are back in public session.
Okay, Mike, ordinance 2018:27.
Ordinance 2018:27, an ordinance establishing salary ranges for the police chief of the township of Parsippany Troy Hills. The notice for the ordinance above was published in the Daily Record, the official newspaper of the township of Parsippany Troy Hills, on November 28th, 2018. This ordinance was introduced at the November 20th, 2018 regular meeting. Motion to accept that ordinance 2018:27 be heard in its second and final reading by title only.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Motion to open the public hearing on ordinance 2018:27.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes. Floor is open to the public on this ordinance only. Okay.
Seeing no one come forward, motion to close the public hearing for ordinance 2018:27.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Floor is closed.
Whereas the above ordinance was read in title on second reading and the hearing held thereon, now therefore be it resolved that said ordinance be passed on final reading, and that a notice of final passage of said ordinance be published in the newspaper according to law. Motion to approve the above resolution.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes. Okay, Mrs. Peterson. Ms.
Ordinance 2018:28, an ordinance of the Township of the Council of Township of Parsippany Troy Hills, County of Morris, State of New Jersey, amending and supplementing Chapter 290, Parks and Recreation Areas and Public Lands, Article 1, Motor Vehicle Fees, Section 290-4, the Knoll Country Club Utility Fees, and Charter A 445 Fees, Compilation Section A 445-37, Knoll Country Club Utility of the Code of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills in the County of Morris, New Jersey. The notice for the ordinance above was published in the Daily Record, the official newspaper of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills, on November 7, 2018. This ordinance was introduced at the November 20th, 2018 regular meeting. Motion to accept that ordinance 2018:28 be heard in its second and final reading by title only.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Mr. DePiero. A roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Public hearing 2018:28. Motion to open the public hearing for ordinance 2018:28.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Mr. DePiero. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
The floor is open on this ordinance only. Seeing no one else.
Motion to close the public hearing for ordinance 2018:28.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero.
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Floor is closed.
Whereas the above ordinance was read in title on the second reading and a hearing held thereon, now therefore it be resolved that said ordinance be passed on final reading and that a notice of final passage of said ordinance be published in the newspaper according to law. Motion to approve the resolution above.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Mr. Council President, I have prepared a statement I'd like to read into the record.
Good.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, Board of Education members that just happen to be taxpayers. Tonight, after extensive discussion that dates back to the Barbario-Inglesino administration, the council will vote on the Stanbury project located at 1515 Route 10 East. This project was first negotiated under the prior administration and with the previous township attorney. In fact, the process declaring this property a redevelopment area began as far back as the spring of 2015. Again, under the prior administration. with council resolution adopted in December of 2016, followed by an August 2017 ordinance to make the formal redevelopment declaration. All were unanimously supported by the council under the prior administration. After my election in 2017, but prior to my swearing in, I requested during transition that any votes on this project be held until this year, while prior administration had sought a special meeting on December 27th. December 27th. The developer honored my request as mayor-elect to hold off. He's not a Grinch. Let me say that conceptually, I am not in favor of pilots, payment in lieu of taxes, or payments especially with commercial, that are especially with a commercial component. This is despite the fact that these types of projects have become more common in the suburbs, with several pilots having been approved in Morris County communities over the past several years. However, the township spent considerable resources under the prior administration and had invested heavily in this project. A failed project would also place considerable pressure on the township, as it is an important component of our affordable housing plan, which is due in the courts in February of next year. With all of those facts, my focus quickly became one very simple question: how do we make this better? First, the number of units was way too high. Through intensive negotiation, our team was able to reduce the number to 441. We also negotiated the removal of the Kelly Act. Now, the Kelly Act is a state law which requires towns to reimburse housing complexes for snow removal, garbage and recycling pickup, and street lighting, if we do not provide the service directly. In this case, we would not provide nor reimburse for these services based upon the developer's agreement, therefore building in a savings for us in taxpayer money automatically. Our team forced the developer to commit to long-needed infrastructure improvements at the Dryden Way and Route 10 connection. These improvements were moved to the beginning of the project rather than the end in order to alleviate traffic problems immediately. The issue of traffic is a key concern of my administration, and we are committed to working with the State Department of Transportation, the county, and any and all developers to ensure that we are easing congestion and traffic in Parsippany. Stanberry is also slated to make a significant contribution to our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the equivalent of 34 units, in addition to those being developed on-site. This will further assist with our affordable housing obligation without developing 34 additional units. Most significantly is the increase in pilot payments from $800,000 to $1.3 million per year. Increasing the pilot was essential to the benefit of the town and the taxpayers. We negotiated very hard for that. With that said, I think this project, absent of the pilot, is the type of forward-thinking project we need here in Parsippany. While I understand, respect, and even agree with that the pilot component of this project is not incredibly attractive, it is leaps and bounds better than we found it on January 1st, 2018, $1.3 million. To the council members who were for it before they were against it, I don't really know what to say, but to the residents I do. Certain members of this council have a tendency to want to move the goalpost on this administration. They change their votes dependent upon politics rather than conviction. I did not dismiss this project for it being a red development. I judged it on its merits and negotiated improvements where I found deficiencies. To the council members who have been consistent, while we may not agree, I respect your position, your argument, and your justification for your vote. I will end with this. Parsippany is required to complete and submit our COA plan in court in February. That leaves us less than 2 months to finalize the plan. The council must and does have a seat at the table to review every property and provide a thumbs up or a thumbs down for inclusion in the plan. There will be no 11th hour bait and switch like we have seen here before. The Affordable Housing Plan is mandated by the Superior Court. It requires council approval. Stanberry is an important component of that plan. Should it fail tonight, it will need to be removed from the plan. What will replace it? That will be up to this council. They will decide. A failure to submit COA plan by the township by the required date exposes us to a loss of immunity and the real potential for builders' remedy lawsuits. It will leave Parsippany exposed. Given these facts, I felt it very necessary for each council member to consider their consequences of their votes tonight. Thank you very much. Mr. Council President, that concludes my statement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we know why he's giving me the big eyes.
Yes?
At this point, I'll ask counsel for Stanberry, Steve Perlman, to please come to the mic.
Gotta ask first, not to.
That's fine.
It's late, I'm tired too. Mr. Council President, Mr. Mayor, Town Council, Steve Perlman. I used to live in Montclair, now I live down the shore, so I don't have a Parsippany residence, I apologize. Although I used to have a law office in town. I stand here tonight with a request. I listened to Attorney London's presentation, which was very informative. I appreciate that the council has a lot to consider with your COA situation. I also know that I lecture state and nationally on pilots and RABs, and I know they're complicated because I talk to audiences for people who are involved in this field. We don't want you to be force-fed. We want you and the community to understand this project and frankly value it the way we value it. We spent a lot of time working on this question and answer document that we've left copies for everybody. We really would like people to look at it, understand it, because we've sat here through several meetings and I believe on that sheet we've answered every question that we've heard. And we think that when you take this all in context, as I understand from your attorney's presentation, you have a very short window to figure out your COA situation because you're in that settlement litigation. So I would ask, in that spirit of trying to get something that everyone is happy with, that you table the motion for tonight. Everybody take time, get better informed, and then at a future date, we'll reschedule with the town attorney, and let's come back and vote in that case. That's what we request on behalf of my client.
So there has been a formal request by the developer to pull the ordinance until a later date, so we would like a motion to table, along with a second and a roll call vote, please.
Council President.
And at this time,
rather than a motion to table, I would prefer a motion to continue.
Mr. DePiero, this is the end of our legislative calendar year, and I think
You can't continue through into another year?
no, we can't. Yeah,
Oh,
correct.
okay, I understand. All right.
and we would be tabling ordinance 2018-29, and we will also be tabling ordinance 2018-30, as we still need to await a decision from the planning board whether with regards to consistency with the master plan.
So motion to table.
Second.
Okay, so a motion to table ordinance 218-29 and ordinance 218-30 was made by Council Member Emily Peterson, and it was seconded by Council Member Loretta Grignani. We have a roll call vote at this time. Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
At this point, the motion passes and both ordinances are tabled until determined by the township attorney and the attorney for the developer.
Through you, Council President, to Mr. Lott, Jim, could you just discuss the fact that based on the change of the calendar year, the entire process would need to start over with a reintroduction with any amendments or anything of that nature, and then a second date for adoption?
Yes, that's correct.
That's why I was trying to continue. We wouldn't have to do that.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, because the legislative year ends, it has to be reintroduced next year.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. DePiero? Non-consent?
Non-consent agenda, okay. Resolution 2018-197. Resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills authorizing approval to submit a grant application and execute a grant contract with the New Jersey Department of Transportation for the Green Bank Road Safety and Improvement Project. Motion to approve the above resolution.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
R 2018-198, resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills adopting personnel policies and procedures. Motion to approve the resolution?
Second.
Motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Mr. DePiero. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Resolution 2018-199, resolution of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills placing a lien on a particular property for failure to abate dangerous conditions. Motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Resolution 2018-200. Resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills awarding contract for employee dental insurance services on a self-insured basis. Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Grignani, seconded by Mr. DePiero. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
2018-201, resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills awarding a contract with VSP for employee vision care benefits. Motion to approve the above resolution.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
R 2018-202, resolution of Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills awarding a contract for medical stop-loss insurance services and medical claims costs for the Township's limited self-insured health benefit insurance program. Motion to approve the resolution?
Second.
Motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Mr. DePiero. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Resolution 2018-203, resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills awarding contract with Benicard Services LLC for employee prescription insurance benefits. Motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Resolution 2018-204. Resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills authorizing award of contract to Accusor, 1460 Route 9 North, Suite 310, Woodbridge, New Jersey, 07095, for risk management consultant / liability insurance broker of record services. Motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Grignani, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Resolution 2018-205, resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills authorizing award of a contract to Aquashore, 1460 Route 9 North, Suite 310, Woodbridge, New Jersey, 07095, for health insurance broker of record services. Motion to approve the resolution above.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yeah, I mean, is this the one that we just got the information on?
The insurance, yes, that is correct.
Yeah, how come we got that so late? Before we were able to really review it?
Through you, Council President, they needed to collect the year-end numbers. To be honest with you, my office actually pushed them very hard to try to get that in a timely fashion. It had to do with the fact that we needed to do the renewal before year's end, so it was time sensitive.
But, you know, shouldn't we be able to review this before we vote on it? I mean, I think we should have some ample time going forward to be able to look at it.
But we need to continue the insurance.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm saying we just got it today.
I will make it a priority through our broker to ensure that we have that information to you sooner as we renew next year.
Okay. So, motion to approve the resolution? Did I read it? I forgot.
Done. You have to vote. I think you're the roll call.
Roll call then.
No,
Yes,
we're in
Ms.
the middle.
McCarthy, you
have
said
to
yes.
vote
Oh, okay. Yes.
Okay, and Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. This is the big one here.
Okay, so R 2018-206, resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills of its intention to revise the master plan and development regulations for plan conformance for land in the planning area.
Correction before we go to motion, it just Highlands plan conformance for land in the planning area, and that resolution will be corrected.
Yeah, and I just want to say that I think that what everybody had to say tonight was very important. And I think that as we go forward with this development process, which we all know is coming, that the Highlands Council is going to provide more sustainable development with respect to stormwater management, protecting our water sources, and do the same for development of vacant lands, I'm sure. And, I know that they mentioned Waterview, and I think that if the town was in conformance at the time, it probably would have mitigated some of the problems that we're seeing now, some of the flooding and erosion and loss of habitat in this particularly sensitive environmental area. So I think that if we enjoy the water that we have, that we need to really protect and conserve it. And I think the Highlands presents us with a valuable resource for that purpose, and also to help minimize the impact of the development that we know that's coming. So, a motion to approve the resolution?
Second.
Motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call. Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes, before I make a vote, before I present my vote, in talking with Miss Leslie London, I had asked her when we had a break if I vote yes on the Highlands at this time, would it impact us with our COA for our round 3? And she said no, it would not. It would not affect us at all. It would come into effect in 2025, and for that reason, I will vote yes on the Highlands.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes. Have a good night, guys.
Consent agenda. Be it resolved, all items listed with an asterisk are routine and non-controversial by the Township Council and will be approved by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by Mr. DePiero. Roll call. Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
CFO Ann Cucci recommends authorization for payment. Authorized payment of the 11/30/18 regular and miscellaneous payroll estimated at $1,700,000. Payment of bills from voucher list 11/29/18-12/13/18 totaling $4,228.79.82. Motion to approve. Second. 4 million?
Who's seconding?
I do.
Janice.
Motion made by Ms. Grignani, seconded by Ms. McCarthy. Roll call. Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes. Before we go into executive session, I just want to make an announcement that when we get out of executive session, it is possible that we will be taking action on this matter. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Resolution. Whereas the Open Public Meetings Act, PL 1975, Chapter 231 permits the exclusion of the public from the meeting in certain circumstances. And whereas the Township Council is of the opinion that such circumstances presently exist, and whereas the Township Council wishes to discuss personnel matters, and whereas minutes will be kept, and once the matter involving the confidentiality of the above no longer requires confidentiality, the minutes can be made public. Now therefore be it resolved by the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills that the public be excluded from this meeting. Motion to adjourn into closed session.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero.
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes. We're going into closed.
Okay. Put fingerprints on.
All right.
All right, on the record.
Yes.
Entertain a motion to reconvene.
Motion.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by Mr. DePiero. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Okay,
Entertain a
we're
motion
adjourned.
to adjourn the meeting.
Motion.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy? Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
35, Colette.
Hey, everybody have a good Christmas.